evening, everybody. It's Wednesday. You know what that means this week? It is story time, and I don't know about you, but I'm excited to be back reading A Warrior's Heart. We're getting into some slower chapters that are a little bit less chaotic, and I'm really excited to continue this story. I hope you are too. I've spent a lot of time over the last 2 months really digging into Marin's stories and reworking them. Some pretty significantly. I added a lot of material to Train Your Daughter. A Warrior's Heart got some love, but not quite as much. So I'm really excited to see how these updates affect the story and if you guys enjoy this evening. For anybody who might be lurking or new, my name is Meshla. I am primarily an audiobook streamer. What that means is that I write and read my own Star Wars fanfiction here on Twitch, and I have been writing Star Wars fanfiction for over 25 years, and I'm here to share it with you this evening. So, give me just 1 second while I tweak things. There we go. Yeah, sorry. Was adjusting the color temperature on my key light because I was a little bit too yellow. So, trying to make it a little bit more natural, so please let me know if that worked for you guys. I'm constantly changing things because the light levels in my room get a little weird. But I'm glad to have you all here this evening, and I hope you enjoy the story. We are continuing this evening with chapters 19 to 21 of A Warrior's Heart, which is the story we've been reading for the last, I'd say 2 or 3 months, because I only do story time every couple of weeks. It's been a while. This has been an ongoing thing, so I'm actually really excited to see how this goes this evening. And I'll warn you in advance, I am by no means a professional voice actor. I do try, I do my best, but after a while my voice gets tired. Alright. Turn my music down just a little so that you guys can hear me and not necessarily just the music. You let me know if those levels are okay. Alright, I guess we're having jazz tonight. Alrighty. A Warrior's Heart, Chapter 19. Dorza Estate, Marin's room, late night. The cane leaned against the nightstand. Her knees throbbed from the walk, wrapped tightly beneath the soft blanket Callista had left folded at the end of the bed. The lanterns had been dimmed, and Jared, bless him, had stepped out to fetch something warm to drink. He hadn't asked, but he'd known. Marin lay still, her fingers resting over her stomach, the gentle rise and fall of her breath the only movement, except it wasn't quiet. Not truly. The force stirred like a draft through old stone. She'd felt it before, during meditations of the Proxium, during battle, and during pain. But this was different. Not urgent, not loud, but present, patient, like it was watching her. No, she thought. Not watching. Waiting. She sat up slowly, her body protesting, but her mind sharper now. Awake. Tuned, even. Her eyes drifted to the far wall where the outline of her father's old chest sat in shadow, where, deep within the shrine beneath the estate, Jarius' helmet remained locked away. A relic, a memory, a burden, but also a promise. She felt it now, the same presence she'd glimpsed in the dream. The water, the reflection, the saber she had not yet built, the 3-ringed hilt that hadn't yet taken form. What did it mean? What did Vernice's quest have to do with her? Why had Stefan not called? Why did she already know he would? The force shifted again, as though in answer. Not a word, not a voice, but pressure, a weight against her soul. Not yet, it seemed to say, but soon, very soon. And with it came the slow realization that something was building, far beyond Tanagas, beyond the shrine, even beyond Korriban, which she did not yet know would be her crucible. Something else, older, hidden, and somehow tied to her. She didn't sleep again that night. When Jared returned with the tea, she accepted it in silence and watched the window long after the stars began to fade. Catan, Praxium. The mountain winds outside the high windows were quiet tonight, more still than usual. Stefan stood in the central hall. Lights dimmed, his hands folded behind his back. He wasn't meditating, not quite, but the force had grown restless. It had started earlier that evening, a flicker, a pressure at the base of his spine, the kind that Jedi don't ignore, not if they live long enough to trust their instincts. And now, he knew. Merrin was moving again, not just physically, not just on her feet, but within. He closed his eyes. He saw Ariana, bright and fast and full of questions. He saw Rinius, sitting quietly in a library full of dust, reading something over and over until his hands shook. He saw Jared, always near, too near, his heart wrapped around someone who could never stand still. And he saw Merrin, kneeling in the candlelight. Her hand was outstretched towards something not there yet. Something she would build, and it would change everything. He opened his eyes and went to his desk. The datapad was already waiting. There were no words on the screen, but the message was coming, and soon it would be sent. August 5. The Desert Estate Shrine, early morning. Merrin moved slowly. The cane tapped softly on the stone steps as she descended into the lower levels of the estate. The light was pale above, but down here it was flickering and golden. She'd lit the candles herself. Her breath caught as she reached the doorway. The wood still bore the faint marks of her father's tools, uneven, honest, shaped by hand. She reached out and traced the grain with her fingers. The air inside the shrine was cool, and yet heavy with memory. The table stood just as she left it, the niche in the stone, and the helmet, Jerace's helmet, resting on its stand like a ghost that refused to vanish. She stepped forward. The stone floor whispered beneath her feet. She sat slowly, cross-legged despite the ache in her knees. She laid the cane beside her and let the silence settle around her like an old cloak. Then, from the pocket of her tunic, she withdrew the ring. It was durasteel, plain and unadorned, except for 3 perfect grooves cut into its surface. She didn't know why she'd kept it, or why it mattered. But as she stared at it now in the hush of the shrine, she saw it in her mind's eye. The hilt, her saber, it had those rings, and she hadn't even built it yet, not even spoken of it. But it was hers. And somewhere, somehow, she understood that this was more than style, more than tradition. The rings were a tether, a linkage, a lineage. From Jarius to her, from Catan to Tanagas, from who she had been, to who she must become. Her fingers tightened around the ring, and she closed her eyes, and in the silence, the force answered. The candlelight flickered gently, causing a golden-orange glow across the carved stone. The room held its silence like a memory, unmoving, heavy with presence. She sat unmoving before the altar, the ring cradled in her left hand. Her other hand rested lightly on her knee, just above the faint scar she would carry for the rest of her life. Her father's helmet watched her from its place in the wall, the same burn-scored plates, faint dent on the side he never explained, the visor dark and cold. But she remembered the way it had looked when he wore it, how it seemed to become part of him. Not armor, but identity. Not defense, but purpose. And for the first time in a long while, she spoke. Softly. I don't know if you meant for me to find this. She lifted the ring slightly as if he could see it. I don't even know what it is. I've been wearing your sigil for so long, I forgot what my hands feel like when they build something of their own. Not because I had to. Not because I needed to fight. Just because I wanted to. She looked down at the ring, rolling it once between her fingers. You built this shrine with your hands, not a lightsaber, not a rifle, just stone, wood, place. Her voice caught. I'm not you. I know that now. But I think I understand what you were trying to leave me. She looked up again, her gaze on the helmet. At least, I'm trying to. A heavy silence stretched after that, the kind that wasn't lonely, but deep and full. She reached forward and placed the ring at the base of the stand, just for now, and whispered, "When the time comes, I'll carry it forward." Her voice was steady now. She stood slowly, one hand on the cane, and turned back toward the stairs. The flame behind her guttered, but did not die. Catan, the Praxium. The wind had returned. Stefan stood on the open veranda just below the Praxium's meditation hall. Cloak caught gently in the breeze, his eyes fixed on the distant snowline in the mountains beyond. He'd felt it hours ago. Marin entering the shrine. Her pain, yes, but also her clarity, her choice. Not because she was healed, but because she had stopped hiding from what was coming next. The datapad buzzed softly on the table beside him. Stefan didn't look at it, not right away. He already knew what it was. Bernice's message sent from some forgotten corner of the mid-rim. Partial log. A name. A trail. Ariana. The force rippled around him, not with urgency, but with inevitability. He moved to the desk and sat down, activating the secure channel. His fingers hovered over the template for a long moment before typing. Marin, I'll make this simple. Bernice has found something, a piece of her, of Ariana, and I believe this trail may be more than just personal. When you're ready, come to Catan. I will be waiting. He paused and then added, You've always carried more than you let us see. It's time we followed that light wherever it leads. Stefan. He didn't sign it as a Jedi Master, he signed it as a father who had trained her in silence, and trusted her without question. On August 5, mid-morning, Marin stood just beyond the grass of the rear courtyard, one hand braced on the cane, the other resting lightly on the railing beside her. The sun was warm, but the breeze was still cool. She could hear the pines shifting, smell the dew still clinging to the stone. She was trying to walk without the cane again. Jared stood just a few meters behind her, close enough to intervene, but he didn't. He never did unless she needed him. Ethan stood further back, his arms crossed, watching like a sentry. Callista beside him was quieter, her fingers folded into her sleeves. She's pushing too fast, Ethan murmured. Callista's gaze didn't leave Marin. She has to, Ethan exhaled. You don't push through a shattered knee just to prove a point. She's not proving anything, Jared said without turning. She's becoming. Marin took a step, just one. It sent a jolt through her frame, but she didn't stumble. Another. This one was steadier. Her jaw tightened, her eyes burned, but she kept going, one slow step at a time across the stone path toward the trees. Couldn't even stand 2 weeks ago, she said, quietly, mostly to herself. Ethan's voice reached her low and grounded. You're not the same girl who couldn't stand. She turned back slightly, just enough to meet his gaze. I know, she said. That's what scares me. Jared stepped forward finally, falling at a step beside her. Then walk with the fear. Just don't let it walk you. They moved on together, the sun rising slowly behind them. Callista, who was still standing with Ethan, allowed herself a soft smile. She's almost ready. Ethan didn't answer right away, but when he did, his voice held something rare. Hope. Yes, he said. She is. Southern Colony, the outer perimeter trail. The path wasn't worn, but Iran knew it by heart now. It carved through the pine-shadowed ridgeline above the valley, just high enough to glimpse the rising dome of the colony's shield generator and the gleaming steel of a few new defense emplacements, still under construction. Aaron was making good on the upgrades Marin had quietly authorized weeks ago. Iran didn't look back. He didn't need to. He could hear Noel's steps behind him, soft, steady, and unhurried. She hadn't spoken much since they'd left the bunker. That silence, it used to comfort him. Used to mean they understood each other too well for words. Now it felt like standing near a loaded blaster. No trigger pulled, just wait. tension, and history. Almost there, he said, his voice low. Noel said nothing. The wind moved between the trees. Birds called faintly overhead. I could have left you behind, he added. You know that. She stepped up beside him. Not ahead, not behind, just level. You didn't. He glanced at her. Why do you think that is? Noel's jaw tightened briefly. Because you wanted answers. Maybe. They walked a few more paces in silence, and then finally Aren stopped. They stood at the overlook above the colony. The early afternoon sun caught the Durasteel rooftops, the green glass of the biodomes, and the flags just beginning to stir in the breeze. Life continued here, quiet but defiant. I gave Aren my word, he said, that I'd help train them, stay a while, prove that I actually meant it. She looked out over the colony. And you're going to keep that? I am. There was a pause. Her voice softened, but only slightly. Even with me here? He didn't answer immediately. You left me on Tanagas to die. You were compromised. You were silent. Newell's voice dropped. They said if I didn't abandon you, they'd do worse than kill us both. Aren turned slightly towards her. They already did. There was silence again. And then Newell said, almost too quietly to hear, I'm not Deathwatch anymore. Aran's eyes narrowed. Then what are you? She met his gaze fully now. I'm trying. Not pleading. Not defensive. Just the truth. He looked away first, back to the colony. Try here, then. But you'll earn nothing from them. Not without blood, sweat, or time. I'm not asking, then, he replied. Only you. That landed harder than it should have. Aren turned and started walking again. But this time, he didn't walk ahead of her. He let her fall and step beside him. Drink water. We might get to chapter 22. We'll see. I don't know how long it is. Alright. But we're making pretty good time. Do let me know if I'm reading too fast. I am trying very hard to not do that, so please let me know if I'm going too fast. The southern colony, outer ring. The door to the small barracks swung open with a reluctant creak. Dust drifted in the sunlight slanting through the high windows. There was a short hallway, 2 rooms, no luxuries. Perfect. Aren stepped inside and let the quiet settle. He dropped the canvas duffel onto the cot nearest the far wall, took a breath, and then stood still. Behind him, Noel hovered near the threshold like a shadow, not yet sure if it belonged to anything. She was silent, but not out of place, like someone who had lived in ruins too long to be surprised by shelter. I'm not here to make you comfortable, Aren said, not turning around. I didn't expect you to be. He sat on the edge of the cot, unbuckling one of his gauntlets. This isn't a second chance. I know. If you try anything, I won't. He looked up, finally. Her expression didn't flinch. It never had. Maybe that's why it had hurt so much when she left him to die. Or maybe it was just that the Mandalorian in him still clinging to the idea of clan, of bond, even when the galaxy had chewed it up and spit it out. He sighed and gestured to the second cot. Get some rest. You'll be working by dawn. She stepped inside, crossing the room slowly. But before she sat, she looked at him. I meant it, Ran. I didn't come back to betray you. He didn't answer right away. Then, without looking at her, he said, Then don't. Aren stood at the high window of the communications tower, one hand resting lightly against the transparent steel. From here, he could see most of the colony. Scattered buildings, greenhouses, patrol markers, and in the distance, the training grounds near the southern edge where Aren now resided. He hadn't interfered. He hadn't asked. But he knew. The woman, Noel, was formerly a member of the Death Watch. That was enough to set a few stomachs churning in the command staff, but Aren had vouched for her, however reluctantly, and Aren, for reasons he didn't yet speak aloud, had chosen to allow it. Still, he watched. Watched them settle in, watched the old barracks come alive again, and quietly, discreetly, he'd ordered the internal monitors rerouted. just in case. A ping drew his attention. He crossed the room, tapping a panel on the central console. Update received. Durza Estate medical scan. Subject, Marin Durza. Status, improving. Slow but stable recovery. Attempted assisted walking twice this week. Emotional strain noted. No relapses. Aaron nodded to himself. Then silently sent a message, not to Marin directly, but to the secure line Ethan had left open for him. Thank you for the update. I won't disturb her, but tell her, when she's ready, that we're here. He hesitated, and then added, and so is her place. He closed the console. Outside, the wind shifted, and somehow, somewhere beneath it all, the rhythm of the colony held steady. We have an ad starting in 4 minutes and 10 seconds, just FYI. Outer barracks, that night. It was quiet now. The kind of quiet that felt earned, not peaceful, at least not yet, but heavy with the aftershock of words unsaid. Moran sat outside the barracks beneath the covered awning, one boot planted on the railing, his arms folded. His helmet rested on the bench beside him, dew beating along its rim above the visor. Night pressed in around the pines, thick and fragrant. Noel hadn't tried to speak again. She sat inside, unmoving, her silhouette faint against the dim light in the window. She wasn't sleeping. She was just still. She hadn't apologized. She hadn't made excuses, either. And that was the only reason he hadn't put her on the next outbound shuttle to Catane. But the clearing lived in his memory like shrapnel. The cables, Marin's scream, the way Noel had turned away when it came down to force, but not when it came to standing with her brothers in armor. He didn't need to ask her why. He already knew the answer. Because for a long time, they were both the kind of people who chose survival over mercy, who did what had to be done, who let others bleed so long as the mission went on. But Marin had changed that. For him, at least. And maybe, just maybe, Noel saw it too. There were footsteps, quiet ones. He turned just slightly as Noel stepped outside. She didn't sit. She didn't even meet his eyes. Just leaned against the railing across from him, her arms folded. I remember her, she said softly, in the clearing. The way she didn't scream at first, just fought. Silent. Aran didn't answer. I was ordered to hold her down, Noel continued. I didn't pull the cables, I didn't fire, but I didn't stop it, either. Still, Aran said nothing. I was angry, she added. Not at her, at myself, at what I knew was coming. You're telling me this why? Because I know what I did. Her voice was low and flat. And I know it'll never be enough, but I won't pretend I wasn't there. Finally, Aran looked up at her. You want forgiveness? No, Noel said. I want clarity. A beat of silence stretched between them. And then Aran leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes sharp in the dark. You want clarity? He said. Then listen carefully. Noel turned her head just slightly. If I ever think you're here for the wrong reason, if I even suspect you'll bring harm to Marin or this colony, I will not hesitate. Her gaze didn't waver. I believe you. Aran stood and grabbed his helmet, and walked back inside without another word. Noel stayed at the railing alone, but not unmoved. I'm gonna stop there, because we have an ad starting in 7 seconds. Actually, a minute. We have a minute and 4 seconds. I've got time still. I got ahead of myself. Durza Estate, the outer garden walk. Afternoon. The path was only 10 meters long, maybe less than that. Flagstones wound between low green shrubs, tall pine trees casting long spears of shadow over the steps. A quiet space, built years ago by Jarius, a place to breathe. Marin moved slowly across it. Cane in one hand, braced lightly against the railing with the other. Her movements were careful, painful, but there was no hesitation. Each step was an act of will, each pause a calculation of breath and endurance. Ethan stood inside the corridor just beyond the glass doors, his arms folded, one shoulder leaning against the frame. He didn't interrupt. He didn't call out, just watched. Watched her test herself, watched her jaw tighten with each jolt of pain, watched her refuse to stop. And somewhere deep inside his chest, beneath the armor he rarely wore, it ached. Not because he doubted her, but because he remembered Jared carrying her crumpled and bleeding only weeks ago. And we're gonna stop there because we are about to be in an ad. Please take that minute and a half to go take care of yourself, get some water, get a snack, have a stretch. I will see you guys when we're done with the ad in a minute and a half. There we go. Alright. Welcome back from the ads, my friends. You had a chance to go get a drink of water or a snack. Give yourself some love. What I use the ad breaks for. Because it's important to take care of yourself. Whether you're streaming, whether you're working, whether you're just at home. Important to give yourself some self-care. Water, meds, food, especially food. Always important to make sure you get those things. Also, rest, which is a struggle for a lot of us, I know, but I do try. There we go. Because he remembered her standing proud at the shrine, full of fire, and remembered too the way that fire had dimmed when her legs gave out later, in private where no one else could see. He wasn't ready, but she was going anyway. He exhaled slowly. Jared stepped up beside him quietly, his voice low. She's stronger than she was. Ethan nodded once, but not stronger than the storm. Jared glanced over. You think it's coming soon? I think, Ethan said. She knows that it is. You didn't say, Korriban. You didn't need to. None of them knew what would come. Not yet. But they felt it. In the sky, in the stars, in the places the force didn't quite reach. She's still healing, Jared added. And she always will be. Ethan let out a quiet breath. She's her father's daughter, he said at last. And his will. That's more dangerous than anything Deathwatch ever sent. They stood in silence, side by side. Outside, Marin reached the edge of the garden path. She turned back and smiled. Just a little. Ethan gave a nod, small and solid. No praise, just pride. And the sturdy weight of knowing she would never stop. Not now. Not ever. The southern colony. The landing platform, late morning. The shuttle touched down lightly on the old Permacrete pad. The colony itself stretched outward like a living thing. Buildings built of native stone and timber, their curves softened by vines, flowers, and thyme. Marin stepped off the ramp first. She wore no cloak, no sigil today, only her deep blue tunic, black pants, and her repaired belt. Her cane tapped softly against the ramp's edge as she moved, one measured step at a time. Jared stood to her right, watchful and quiet. Ethan to her left, his arms folded over his chestplate. He wore full armor, but no helmet, his eyes already scanning the rooftops beyond. They weren't here for war, but they came ready, all the same. A hush fell over the colonists nearby as they noticed her. The conversations faded. Children paused in their games. Someone whispered her name, not the full one. Just Marin. Not the Jedi, not the Mandalorian. Just Marin. Her breath caught briefly, but she kept walking. They met Aaron near the central courtyard. He'd been waiting, standing in the long shadow of the memorial tree. Same one she'd helped plant years ago after the first battle. His hands were clasped in front of him. There were no guards, and no ceremony. When he saw her, he bowed his head slightly. Lady Durza. Marin, he said, gently. You didn't need to come this soon. I did, she replied. Her voice low but sure. I'm still part of this, and I needed to see it. To see you. Aaron nodded. You look stronger. She gave a faint smile. I'm more stubborn than strong. That made him laugh, just once, and it was warm and brief. Jared stepped back slightly, letting the two of them speak. Ethan stood nearby, close enough to hear, but silent for now. Marin shifted her weight carefully and then looked around. How's it holding up? The southern cliffs? The outposts? Aaron tilted his head. We've kept them manned. Rand's helping reinforce the perimeter. Noel, too. Marin's brow lifted at that. She stayed? For now, Aaron said. Quiet, but helpful. I don't think she wants to run anymore. Marin nodded slowly, her gaze thoughtful. Neither do I. She looked out at the colony, the people beginning to move again, the rhythm of daily life returning around her. I'm not whole yet, she admitted, but I'm here. And I want to help again, not as a symbol, not just as Jerry's his daughter, but as me. Aaron studied her and then stepped forward. Then we'll welcome you, however you return. She didn't smile. Not exactly, but she stood straighter. Well, that was actually not bad. Took me almost an hour to read the first chapters. That's pretty good. And that's about what I was planning on. So, cool. As always, if anybody has any questions about the story, the stream, my writing process, anything like that, please feel free to ask in chat and I will answer what I can. I do try to pay attention to chat as much as I can, but if I'm reading or gaming, sometimes I get totally locked in. So just let me know in chat and I will answer what I can. Also, before anyone asks, yes, I have water, I'm hydrating, especially because I'm reading. Before my mods beat me over the head and tell me to hydrate. Because they do that a lot. That's their job. Alright. Righty. And for anybody else who wandered in while I wasn't looking, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I see a few people. I don't want to, like, pull you out of lurk but I currently see Ajo, and Arcfox, and Divine Miscreant, and Tin Man. Welcome to Wednesday in Storytime with Meshla. Hope you guys are enjoying the story so far as we continue with the Warrior's Heart. It's calmed down a little bit since the last few chapters we were reading, but as you probably have figured out by now, it's not going to stay that way for long. That's just how it is. Sorry. I'm not apologizing. Okay. Chapter 20. Southern Colony, the cliff's top watch point. The wind here was clean. It tasted like pine, like stone long settled. The overlook wasn't fortified, just a natural rise above the trees where the stone bent into a curve. From here, you could see the ocean glinting faintly beyond the forest, and the narrow trails etched like veins through the hills below. Marin stepped slowly toward it, her cane tapping with each footfall. Aran stood ahead, leaning against the rail of a small observation platform. His armor was stripped to the waist, weathered black undersuit beneath, a knife at his side. The wind tossed his hair gently back, and he didn't turn until she was almost beside him. She stopped, but not too close. He looked across at her, and then the cane, and then back again. "You're walking," he said. "I'm trying," she replied, her tone dry. He exhaled slowly. "Figured you'd come here eventually. Because of you?" "No." His gaze tracked the forest edge. "Because of her." Noel was there. Not hidden, not cloaked, just present. Leaning near the edge of the slope where the cliff began to fall away. Her arms were crossed over her chest, her eyes were unreadable. Marin looked at her, and then back at Aran. "You trust her?" "I trust that she didn't run when she could have," he answered. "And I trust that she's trying." Marin considered that. "I know the feeling." There was quiet for a while. Only the wind, only the weight of old choices. And then Aran spoke again. "She was the one who recognized you first, in the clearing." Marin looked at him. "She didn't say your name," he added, "but she knew. That's why she didn't strike first. She let the others take the lead. That hesitation saved you a few seconds." Marin didn't answer right away. She stepped closer to the edge instead, bracing her weight on the cane, gazing at Noel directly. "You were there," she said. Not accusing, not cold even, just true. Noel looked up at her, silent, and then nodded once. "Didn't know that they were going to interrogate you," she said. "I thought you'd run, that you'd fight and disappear into the trees." "I tried," Marin said. "I know." There was another silence. Aran shifted, but didn't interfere. Marin's voice was softer now. "Why didn't you speak up?" Noel looked away. "Because I didn't know who I was backing until I saw what they did to you." "And now?" Marin asked. Noel finally met her gaze again. "Now I don't back anyone." Marin considered that, and then nodded, just once. "That's something." Jared stepped into view nearby. Ethan remained back in the trees, his arms crossed, not interrupting. Aran studied all of it and then finally asked quietly, "Are you going to report her?" Marin didn't answer right away. And then, "No, not yet." "Why not?" "Because she stayed." She turned back to Noel. "And because I'd rather see what you choose to do next." The wind had slowed. The trees below stirred less now, caught in the hush of the coming night. Birds circled far off, low and unhurried, as if even they sensed the weight in the air. Marin sat carefully on the edge of the watchpoint stone ledge. Her cane rested beside her. Her left leg was straight, stiff from the walk. Her right was bent, but only slightly. Bandaged beneath dark fabric, still angry beneath the skin. Aran stood just off to the side, his arms crossed loosely over his chest. Jared stood at the base of the path, watchful but silent. They didn't speak for a long time. And then Marin broke the quiet. "Do you remember what I said?" she asked softly, "right before I dropped?" Aran was quiet, his eyes remained on the trees. he said. Dursa doesn't break. Her mouth twisted into something that wasn't a smile. I meant it. I know, he replied. I believed it. Even when they pulled my arms behind me, even when they... Her breath hitched just once. Even when he drove the blade in, I told myself if I didn't scream, I'd win. Aran finally looked at her. You did win. No, Marin said. Not then. Not really. I still screamed. There was silence again, the kind that came with truth, not shame. I heard you, Aran said, his voice rough. We all did. Marin looked down at her hands. Didn't think anyone would come. We came, he said. You know that now. I do. Her fingers tightened in her lap. But I still hear it. That moment. I know. So do I. She looked at him then. Really looked. You were like them once. His jaw flexed. I was. But you weren't there, she added. You didn't... No, he cut in. But I've done enough. I've stood in enough of those circles. I know what they were trying to do. Marin nodded once. Break me. They didn't. No, she agreed. But I don't walk right anymore. Aran stepped closer. Not quite touching, just there. You walk, he said. You got up. That matters more than how. There was silence again. This one different. And then softly. I didn't think I'd trust anyone in that moment again. But you were there. So was Ethan. So was Jared. He looked past him toward the shadows where Jared waited. He didn't speak. He only watched her with that steady gaze, one she'd come to know as a tether in her darkest moments. I thought it would make me weaker, she whispered, needing you all, being seen like that. And now? Aran asked. She looked back at him. Now her voice was steadier. Now I think it makes me stronger. Aran didn't smile, but his voice was low when he said, You're not done. No, Marin agreed. Not even close. A bird cried high above. The wind shifted. Jared stepped forward at last, close enough to join them. He didn't say anything. Just placed a hand gently on her shoulder. He let it stay there. Together, the three of them stood in silence, not to mourn the clearing, but to mark it, and to leave it behind. Ethan stood on the ridge with his arms folded, the wind threading through the trees around him. Below, far in the distance, the colony stirred with its evening rhythms. Lights flickering on, voices fading in low hums, and somewhere in the south a faint clang of old tools against stone. Aran stood a few steps away, one hand resting on the hilt of the long knife at his hip, his gaze fixed not on the colony, but on the trail winding up from the cliffs. They'll be down soon, Ethan said. Yeah, Aran answered. She's slower now. She's still walking, Aran grunted. Barely. There was no accusation in it, just quiet observation. The kind warrior shared when the weight of wounds couldn't be ignored. Ethan tilted his head, his eyes narrowing toward the path. I thought I was prepared to see her hurt again. Justine. He stopped. Aran looked over. That hasn't happened yet. A muscle in Ethan's jaw twitched. No, it hasn't. See it coming? I feel it. Ethan's voice was low. The pressure, the pull, like something's winding tighter every day, and she's in the center of it. She always has been. They stood in silence, and then Ethan said, You trust Noel? Ryan's expression didn't change. No. Then why is she still here? Because I'm trying to believe people can change, Aran said quietly. Because Marin didn't break, and maybe Noel didn't want her to. You think that matters? Aran finally turned to look at him. I think it might. Ethan looked back at the trail where Marin's silhouette had just appeared, leaning slightly against Jared, the cane tapping softly as they descended. He didn't speak again for a long moment, and then she walks like Jarius did near the end. Aran turned back toward the trail, too. I wouldn't know. I do, Ethan murmured. And it's not just the limp, either. It's the weight. The way she carries the pain like it's hers. And is it? No. Ethan's voice was hard now. But she'll carry it all that way anyway. The trail down from the cliffs was narrow but familiar. Pine roots crisscrossed the dirt and lanterns flickered to life on the waypost, casting long shadows across the stone. Merrin walked slowly, her cane in one hand, her other arm looped through Jared's for balance. She hated needing it. But she didn't pull away, either. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was lived in, like a cloak they both wore without needing to speak. About halfway down, she said quietly, I didn't tell you everything about that day. Jared didn't look at her. I know. I wanted to, she said. But the words got stuck. I kept seeing the shuriken in my knee. I kept feeling it. He nodded, still listening. I wasn't afraid of dying, she murmured. I was afraid they'd leave me alive, bent, less than whole, that they'd carve something out of me I wouldn't get back. Jared's voice was low. They didn't. No, she said, but they tried, and I can't walk 10 steps without remembering how close it came. He finally looked at her. His pale blue eyes were soft, grounded. You're still here, he said. Hi, Sniper! Welcome in! Have a seat. She stopped walking and looked at him fully. Why does that matter so much to you? She asked. Not accusing, just curious. Hope you're having a good evening, Sniper. His jaw tensed. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer, and then... Because I see you, Baron. Not just the warrior, not the title. You. He paused. And I love you. That's not new. She blinked. Her breath caught, and she turned her head slightly, hiding the way it struck something deep. I thought I'd lost that part of myself, she admitted. The part that knew how to be loved. You didn't, he said. You just buried it under too much pain. She looked at him again. Raw, but steady. You're not afraid of what I've become? No, he said, because I haven't met the end of you yet. Just the middle. And for the first time in weeks, she actually laughed. Not loudly, but true. Behind them, Ethan stopped walking and gave them space. He let the moment pass without stepping in. He didn't need to. Because as the sky darkened and the estate came into view, he saw what mattered most. Daughter. Still here. Still fighting. But now, no longer alone. Georgia Estate, the inner hearth room, nightfall. The estate was quiet. Too quiet. Merrin sat curled in one of the old armchairs near the hearth, her legs stretched out carefully. She'd removed the braces for the night, but the pain still lived behind her eyes, steady and cruel and enduring. A candle flickered on the table beside her. She wasn't reading. She wasn't even meditating. She was simply there. The silence broke when Callista entered the room. She wore her simple healer's robe, the hem still damp from the walk across the outer veranda. Her hair was bound back. Her presence, as always, was quiet, but not passive. Merrin glanced up and met her gaze. Checking in on me again? I never stopped, Callista said, kneeling slowly beside her. You just finally sit still long enough to catch. Merrin didn't smile, not fully, but something in her face softened. You should rest, Callista added. I can't, Merrin murmured. Not yet. Callista studied her and then reached out, brushing Merrin's hair behind her ear in a gesture that was more mother than Jedi. You always knew it would cost you, she said, but you never imagined how much. Merrin closed her eyes. I thought Maybe if I fought hard enough, if I endured enough, I could come out on the other side untouched. And did you? No, Marin whispered, but I came through it. Callista's hand moved to rest over hers. You did. The candlelight flickered across Marin's face, catching the edges of the faint scars on her cheek, the still healing burns near her temple. I don't feel strong, she said. Not anymore. Callista's voice was low. Strength isn't the absence of pain, it's in what you choose to do with it. I'm tired of choosing, Marin said quietly, of being the one who has to keep going. I know, Callista said, but you're not doing it alone. Marin looked up at her. Her eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, but they didn't shy away. You stayed. Always, Callista said. Because you're my family, Marin. Not by blood, but by bond. A silence settled between them, deep and reverent. And then Marin whispered, what if I'm not ready for what comes next? Then we wait, Callista said. Together. Marin finally let out a breath. I think I just needed to hear that. You'll hear it as many times as you need, Callista promised, until the stars shift again. And for the first time since the clearing, since the scream, since the pain, Marin leaned into her touch. Not as a warrior, not as a leader, but as a daughter caught in the quiet between storms. We have an ad starting in about 3.5 minutes. The hallway was dim, the sconces turned low for the night. The stone beneath Ethan's boots was cool, the sound of his steps muffled by the old woven rugs Marin had chosen herself years ago, back when her life had still felt like it might one day be her own. He didn't go to his room. Instead, his steps carried him toward the faint golden light spilling from beneath the hearth room door. He paused. He didn't knock. He didn't call out. Inside, he could hear voices, Callista's, low and even, calm as mountain stream, and Marin's, rasped and weary, still cracked at the edges from the strain of too many days, forcing herself upright when her body wanted to collapse. You can identify with that. Ethan closed his eyes and listened. I thought, maybe if I fought hard enough, if I endured enough, I could come out on the other side untouched. His jaw clenched, because he remembered that same thought, echoing in his own mind after Jarius's death, and the fires on Galan, after the first time Marin picked up a blaster too heavy for her hands and tried to aim through tears. I don't feel strong, he said. Not anymore. That hit him deeper than he expected, because she was strong, stronger than him in some ways, but he also knew what it felt like to doubt it, to lose pieces of yourself and wonder if what's left is still worthy of standing. Ethan leaned against the wall, one hand braced flat against a stone, his head bowed. He hadn't said it enough, not lately. How proud he was, how grateful, how much it broke him to see her push through pain she shouldn't have to know. Then we wait, together. I think I just needed to hear that. Ethan's breath caught. He didn't cry, but he ached. His throat burned with emotion. He didn't know if she'd ever tell him what happened in that clearing. Not fully. He didn't know if she could. But he'd seen the scars. The way she froze sometimes when someone moved too fast near her. The way she flinched when pressure touched the brace on her left leg. He'd heard her scream. He would never forget that. And he wouldn't forgive himself for not being faster. But she was still here. Still fighting. Still Marin. He stepped away from the door without making a sound because she didn't need him to come in just yet. She needed space, but she also needed to know in some unspoken way that he was near. So he did what Jarius would have done. He kept watch. Lower levels. Midnight. The shrine lay in stillness. No footsteps echoed here, only the faint sound of wind against the outer stone. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke, of wax and old incense burned long ago. Ethan stood in the archway, his arms folded, his gaze locked on the dim figure of the lady carved into the stone niche. Her features were soft, not warrior, not goddess even, just presence. He hadn't come here in weeks. Not since Marin's Not since before Marin's knees were shattered. Not since the scream that still haunted his dreams ripped from her throat like it was torn from her very bones. He remembered her face when they found her. Bloodied, her knees twisted beneath her, cables biting into her armor, still fighting even after the second stun blast nearly dropped her. She hadn't cried. Not then. But afterward, in the days when the pain refused to fade, he'd heard it in her breathing, in the way she gripped the edge of the table when no one was looking. Durza doesn't break. He clenched his fist. If he could go back and take the blow for her, he would. If he could go back and burn the clearing to ash, he would. But there was no second chances, only choices. Behind him, he heard footsteps, soft and familiar. He turned. Jared. I'm gonna stop there because I think we're about to be in an ad. Go get yourselves a drink of water. I'm gonna do that. Have a stretch. Grab a snack. I'll see you guys in a minute and a half. Alrighty. Thank you guys for hanging out during those ads. I appreciate you. I needed to go find a snack, which I did. Alright. Okay, water. He turned. It was Jared. Did she sleep? Ethan asked, his voice low. Eventually, Jared said. Callista stayed with her. They stood in silence for a moment, and then Ethan said, She hasn't told me what they did. Not all of it. Jared nodded. She told me pieces. Ethan's brow lifted slightly. Jared's jaw tensed. The knee wasn't the worst of it. They tried to humiliate her, break her, called her Lendur, spat on the name Durza, used her own weapons against her. She didn't go on. Ethan exhaled slowly through his nose. He knew what it meant. I thought I could protect her. I taught her to fight, to endure. Thought that would be enough. It wasn't your fault, Jared said quietly. No, Ethan replied, but it was still my responsibility. He paused and then added, she'll tell me when she's ready. She will, Jared said, but you already know, don't you? Ethan nodded once. I knew the moment I saw her face. It wasn't just pain. It was shame. That's what they wanted, Jared said bitterly, to make her believe she was less. They failed, but they definitely left a mark. And then he looked back at the statue. She'll carry it forever. The shrine was carved into the lower levels of the estate, hidden beneath the mountain stone. A single path of carved stone led into the chamber. There was no throne, no altar, just the faint flicker of candlelight playing across unpainted walls and the hand-carved form of the lady. It was neither Jedi nor warrior, but something gentler, a quiet guardian of past and future. Ethan paused at the threshold, the archway looming above him like it had on the day he helped Jarius place the first stones. He didn't come here often. He never had. Not after Jarius had died. Not after Marin had left for the Praxium, and not since the scream. But now, the door was open, and Marin sat inside. She was cross-legged on the polished stone floor, her braces and cane set neatly beside her. Her posture was tense, but centered. Her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed not on the statue, but on the empty air just before it, like she saw something there. She didn't look up when he stepped in, but she knew. Close the door, she said, quietly. He did. Sorry, need water. Okay, there we go. Think I have my voice back? Maybe? And then he sat, not beside her, not yet, just far enough that she could decide if this was her space, or theirs. Silence reigned for nearly a minute, and then she said, "This is where I came after Galan." Ethan glanced over. "I sat right here. 13 years old, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. I thought that if I came here, I'd hear his voice again." Ethan swallowed. She turned her head slightly, and he asked, "You?" "No," she nodded slowly. "I've been remembering that a lot lately. What it felt like, that helplessness, that fire in my chest, it's not gone." He leaned forward, his arms resting on his knees. "I know. I didn't want you to see me like that in the clearing. I didn't want anyone to." "I know that too." She took a shaky breath. "They didn't just restrain me, Ethan. They wanted to undo me." Her voice was so quiet it barely stirred the candle flame. "They called me soft, said my name was meaningless, that I was nothing, just a target, and when I didn't speak, they laughed, even when I screamed." Ethan closed his eyes. "I remember the shuriken," she said. "Not the one I threw, the one he held to my throat, one of my own. I remember how it felt against my skin, and I remember wondering if he'd kill me fast or if they were going to keep breaking pieces of me until he found what was left." She finally looked at him, and her voice didn't shake. "I wasn't afraid to die. I was afraid to survive like that." Ethan said nothing for a long time. He just watched her, saw the fire, the bone-deep grief, the strength she tried not to show. Showing it made her feel like she had to prove she was still standing. "You're here," he said at last. "Still angry. Should be. Still healing. I know. And I don't know if I'll ever stop hearing that voice in my head. The one that told me I deserved it." Ethan's hands clenched on his knees. He moved, just a little closer and rested a hand over hers. That voice is wrong. She blinked once, twice, and then nodded. But she didn't cry, and he didn't press her to. He simply said, "You told me. That's what matters." "Why?" she whispered. "What does that change?" "Because it means you're not alone in it anymore." She closed her eyes, and slowly, she leaned her head against his shoulder. Candles flickered. Outside, the mountain was silent. Inside the shrine, father and daughter sat in the presence of everything that had ever broken them, and the strength it took to stay anyway. I need a stretch break. Oh, goodness. I can feel myself slouching. You get a free stretch off of that one. Okay. In August 5, the clearing. The trees whispered as they passed, thick with pine and the smell of early mountain rain. The path had overgrown in places, the forest trying to erase what had happened here. The scar in the land remained, subtle but undeniable. Marin moved carefully, leaning on her cane. Her gait was uneven but determined. The brace on her left leg was hidden beneath the folds of her cloak, but the way she favored that side made it obvious. Every step was a choice. Sorry. Beside her, Jared walked at her pace, silent but attentive, one hand lightly resting on the curve of her back whenever the terrain turned rough. He didn't hover. He didn't lead. He simply walked with her. Yep. What happens when I'm on the phone all day at work. He simply walked with her. Ethan brought up the rear, his eyes scanning the tree line with practiced caution, though no threat were. Still, he kept a blaster slung low and his Bescad at his side, just in case. The clearing opened before them like a wound, slowly scabbing over. The Tricina sat at the far edge, weathered, quiet, and dusted with pine needles and leaf scatter. Her hull bore fresh scrapes from rough hands and careless boots, but she remained intact, waiting. Marin stood still for a long moment, her breath shallow. "This is where it happened," she said softly. Jared didn't respond. Neither did Ethan. They let her speak. She chose to. "I killed 2 of them," she said, "before they brought me down. I remember the way the air shifted, the way the trap closed." Her hand dropped to her belt, brushing again where her throwing knives had once rested. She hadn't worn or used them in weeks. "They used my own shuriken," she added, "against me. One of them pinned me with it. I still feel it when the wind shifts." Ethan took a breath behind her, but again he said nothing. Marin stepped forward. Her gait faltered once. She hissed, catching herself, but she didn't stop. Jared was there, steadying her arm, just enough to help her across the spot where she'd fallen. She paused beside the old impression in the mossy ground. Her blood had long since washed away, but she remembered. She always would. "I'm not here for them," she said. Jared tilted his head. "Then who?" "Myself." She limped the last few steps to the Tricina, reaching out and placing her hand flat against the hull. The ship responded to her touch. The entry hatch hissed, reluctant but obedient. Inside, the interior was dim, musty even, dust-cloaked, but hers. No one had taken the time to strip her systems. Either they hadn't dared, or they'd known she'd come back. Marin stepped inside, slowly. Jared followed. Ethan remained at the hatch, his eyes flicking toward the trees again, protective to the last. In the cockpit, Marin touched the edge of the console, then, her voice low and even. "They didn't break me. Not really." because this is still mine. Jared stepped forward and placed his hand over hers. No one else ever had a claim. She nodded, and then, for the first time in weeks, she sat in the pilot's chair. The console came alive beneath her fingers, flickering faintly with residual power. The hum of the ship vibrated through her spine, familiar and grounding. I'm not ready to fly here yet, but I will be. Ethan stepped inside at last. You'll fly when it's time, he said. Not before. Marion looked back at him, her eyes clearer than they had been in weeks. Time's coming fast. Ethan exhaled slowly. Yeah, it is. The clearing. Late morning. 2 months since the attack. The light filtered through the trees in slender beams, golden and soft. The wind rustled through the high branches but left the clearing still, quiet, as if the forest itself knew something was ending, beginning again. Jared walked just behind her, his hands tucked loosely behind his back, saber clipped to his belt. He didn't speak. Not yet. He let the rhythm of her cane, the steady click and soft drag, set the pace. Marion stood at the edge of the clearing, her eyes fixed on the ship she hadn't touched in weeks. Rosina, her father's legacy, her first escape, her last promise. She waited, Jared said quietly. She always does, Marion murmured. She took one slow breath and then moved forward. The ship's lines were blocky and weathered with age. The map panel still bore the old patchwork of scarred gray and dusky white. The ghost of Mandalorian markings once burned away and later restored. Beneath it, the desert crest had been worn smooth with time but never erased. Marion paused at the ramp and ran her hand along the hull. Then she reached for the controls. The ramp hissed down slowly as if exhaling after a long silence. Inside, dust motes drifted like memories in the soft light. The pilot's chair still bore the indent of her last visit. Seat beside it remained empty, just as it had the night she stole the ship and chased the men who'd murdered her father. She stepped inside. Jared followed. Marion lowered herself into the pilot's chair. Her leg tensed beneath her, but she didn't wince. She didn't need the cane here. Her hands hovered above the controls for only a moment and then moved with certainty. Power flowed back into the systems. Displays flickered to life. The console hummed in recognition, as if Tresinia had been waiting for her all along. Still flies? Jared asked softly. She will, Marion said. She remembers. He gave a small, quiet smile and lowered himself into the co-pilot's chair. Marion's gaze lingered on the dash. Her fingers brushed over a shallow groove. One Jarius had carved to mark a nav recalibration after the route to Tanagas had changed. He'd never covered it. He said it was a reminder. Her voice came quietly after a moment. This ship found me that night. After I ran, she was already primed, already unlocked, like he'd known I'd come back. Jared's brow furrowed slightly. He left it for you. I think so. She looked at him, her eyes shining, but not with tears. He was always 2 steps ahead. Ethan's mantis fits perfectly in the hangar bay. There's space, as if Jarius knew you'd bring her home one day. Jared finished. Marion nodded. Outside, the wind stirred the clearing. Inside, he lifted the ship gently off the forest floor. The engines whispered. The trees fell away behind them. And Tresinia turned towards home. Doors to the hangar were already open. Ethan stood waiting, his arms crossed, his brow furrowed, not in judgment, but something close to memory. He watched as Tresinia lowered onto the far pad opposite the D5 Mantis he'd once flown beside Jarius. For a moment, the 2 ships mirrored one another, 2 halves of the same war, same family. When the ramp lowered, Marion emerged first, walking without her cane, slow but steady. Jared followed. Ethan stepped forward. She fits, he said, softly. Marion looked across at him. So did Jarius. No one spoke for a moment, and then Ethan placed his hand on the Tresinia's hull and nodded once. Welcome home, he said. That's the end of chapter 20. I'm really trying to not lose my voice, I promise. All these male voices. Georgia, chapter 21. Georgia Estate, hangar, late evening. The lights in the hangar were dimmed to low, just enough for security, just enough to keep the shadows at bay. Rosina sat quietly in the far berth opposite the Huerta. The two ships faced each other like old warriors who'd finally made it home. Worn, scarred, but intact. Marin stood beneath the starboard fuselage, her hand resting on the edge of the boarding ramp. Her breath fogged in the cool air. She was barefoot, her brace hidden beneath the hem of her sleep tunic and pants, her bare shoulders wrapped in a long dark shawl. She hadn't meant to come back tonight, but the ship called to her, or maybe the past did. Her eyes traced the side paneling. The paint had chipped, weathered, scorched in places, and there, just beneath the old refueling port, she found it. Faint. It was almost erased. Still there. The Durza crest. Not large, not boastful. A simple sigil carved directly into the hull plating, not painted. Etched. The lines had been filled once with a metallic compound, long since dulled by time. It was a circle, unbroken, surrounding a diagonal slash that passed through the center. At its midpoint was a single star, 8-pointed, radiating just enough to brush the edge of the circle. The lower left arc of the circle was notched, as if a blade had broken it, but the slash passed cleanly through it anyway. 3 small indentations sat just beneath the crest, like stars, or perhaps echoes of a fingerprint pressed into durasteel. A mark of lineage. Not clan, not even Jedi, but something older. Something his. Darius had never explained its meaning to her, not fully. But as she traced it now, her bare fingers brushing over cool metal, Marin understood more than she ever had. With strength and motion, legacy unbroken, even when damaged. Stars remembered. The late afternoon light bled gold through the window panes as Marin sat on the edge of her bed, her flight gloves resting beside her. The air was still warm from the run, her limbs pleasantly sore from the climb down into the Tracinia's crawl space. She had moved the ship into the estate hangar, and she had powered her father's old freighter down for the first time in years. Sealed her claim back into the durasteel bones. And now, there was silence. Not heavy, just present. She leaned forward, her arms resting on her knees, her eyes drifting toward the open window. A breeze slipped in, cooler now, brushing against her face. She looked down. Her hand had come to rest on the wooden sill, fingers splayed in the groove she'd worn there over the years, waiting for missions, listening to the mountain wind, watching the glow of patrol lights on the distant ridge. And that was when she felt it. A line, not accidental, not weathered, intentional. She leaned in. It was small, nearly invisible, unless the light caught it just right. But there it was. The Durza crest. A circle, except for the slight notch carved into the lower left edge. The slash through it was clean and decisive. The 8-pointed star at the center glinted faintly in the slant of the light, and beneath it, barely visible, 3 small indentations. Not painted, just there. Her breath caught, not because it startled her, but because it felt inevitable, like something that had been waiting for her all this time. He'd carved it here, long before she ever knew what it meant. Darius never asked her to be anything, but he had made space for her to become everything. The workshop. Nightfall. It was dark when she had returned to the forge. The Tracenia sat in the hangar now, dormant, but home again. The old YT 1930 had come home without fanfare, its hull still bearing the soot scars and dulled compound of the Durza crest etched near the refueling port. She had run her fingers over that mark earlier, but now, she needed to see. She entered the workshop barefoot, the stone cool underfoot. Her eyes swept across the shelves, the half-cleaned parts, the old toolboxes sealed with thumb locks she hadn't dared open until now. She exhaled, and then knelt carefully by the far bench, the one her father had used most often, and opened the largest drawer. There were old data disks, a half-buried schematic roll, faded flimsoplast bound in cracked leather cord. She shifted carefully, like turning pages of a life, and then paused. There was a folded sheet of drafting paper, yellowed and fragile with age, resting beneath a schematic for an early shield matrix. She unfolded it gently, laying it flat against the worktop. It wasn't labeled, but the center had a sketch, more detailed than the others she'd found, her father's hand unmistakable in the deliberate simplicity. The crest again, drawn and redrawn, variations, some sharp, others curved. Hi, Lord! Welcome in. Good to see you. Some with longer stars, some with a notched circle exaggerated, and in the corner, in a note in tight compressed script. We carry more than our name. We carry the weight of choosing what it means. Marin's throat tightened. Not clan, not Jedi, not even legacy, but something older, something his, and now it was hers. She sat with the sketch for a long time, her fingers resting just above the drawn star. Outside, the wind had picked up again, brushing through the pines like memory. Inside, Marin Durza leaned forward and slowly, carefully folded the paper into thirds and slipped it into the inner pocket of her tunic. Not to hide it, but to carry it. We have an ad starting in 3 minutes and 38 seconds. August 5, upper study, late evening. The holo projector flickered in the quiet study of the Durza estate. It had once belonged to Jarius. Marin sat with her injured leg curled beneath her, braced against the cushions. The soft blue light cast her face in shadow, but her eyes were steady. Stefan Card's image resolved in the air, calm as always, though his posture straightened when he saw her. Marin, he said, you look stronger. I am, she said softly. Still mending. Stefan inclined his head. That's enough. For now. There was a pause, long and quiet, and then she asked, did my father ever tell you what the crest meant? The Durza sigil? Sigil? Stefan folded his hands before him, his expression thoughtful. Yes. Once. Marin leaned forward. Stefan continued, his voice steady like a teacher returning to an old lesson. The circle represents the unchanging whole, the family that is chosen, not born. It is protection, a boundary, but not a prison. He held his fingers apart to mimic the shape. The slash through the center is not meant as a division, it's the path forward, a reminder that we carry pain and progress together. You move through the circle, you don't stay still. Marin blinked slowly. And the star? The 8-pointed star is the old Katani symbol for guidance. It was Jarius' reminder that no matter how dark the galaxy gets, there's always a way forward, even if it has to be carved. She reached toward the crest at her side, her fingers brushing the faint outline of it on the datapad where she'd traced it. And the notched break on the left side of the circle? Stefan nodded. That's the scar. The part of the sigil that acknowledges what was lost. The blade that shattered it. He told me that was his wife. Her death. Marin's hand froze. He never said her name, Stefan added gently. Only that it had to be remembered, not rewritten, not ignored. That scar stays visible. Marin swallowed. And the 3 small marks beneath? He smiled faintly. That was later. He added those after he brought you to Mount Adon. Said they were stars remembered. One for him. One for you. One for the path you'd walk. He never told me that, Marin whispered. No, Stefan said. But I think he knew you'd ask one day. Marin fell quiet again. Then, after a long moment, she said, he found me on Corellia. I'd stowed away, tried to steal from him. I know, Stefan said gently. I pulled a knife. It broke on his chest plate. I was so sure he'd kill me or turn me in. He didn't. No, she said. He gave me a choice, and I chose to stay. You did, Zephin said. And that is why the circle was whole. I'm gonna stop right there because we have an ad starting in 15 seconds. So it's actually really good timing. How are you tonight, Lord? I hope you're well. Good to see you. I am getting through my chapter. We're actually right on time, actually. Depending on how I feel by the time I finish this chapter, I might do another one. We'll see. Okay. Hi, Tisman! I know. Pesky ads. Yes, it really is.
You're a feisty little one. Fit him with a restraining bolt.
Meshla gifted a tier 1 sub to Dr_Tinman01.
You might want to refresh, if you're in an ad. And we're in an ad, so, yeah. I'll be right back. I think we are back from our ad. Maybe. Yes, Twitch Turbo is fantastic. I have it because it's very useful. It's, I think, $12 a month. And it is definitely a lifesaver because there are so many people I would love to subscribe to, but can't because I don't have the money. So Twitch Turbo is fantastic. And if you can do that, I would recommend it. Also, Tin Man, you are very welcome. You're here all the time, and I like to help with a gift sub whenever I can. I can't do it all the time, but every once in a while I can manage one or two. I have not, Lord. I need to. I have other priorities right now, as I was telling Jet earlier this evening. I am currently in the process of reworking pretty much all of Marin's arc, one story at a time, and it's taking a while, but it's well worth the wait because it's coming out a lot richer per story. Oh, well, let me know. Don't know if that's something I'd want to play on stream, but yeah, definitely let me know and I'll try and find a day. It'd be fun. Let me know. course, that might be a bit of a challenge because my friend that I've been playing with, we have specific mods, so they have to match. I know. That's why I said probably won't play it on stream. Yeah, I know. Yeah. I'd rather not get kicked off of Twitch thing. I like reading to you guys and hanging out far too much. Oh yeah, my friend has that too. It's actually fantastic. Means so if you're playing with just like 2 people, it means you can bring all your companions, which is fantastic. Which is awesome. I haven't played in a hot minute, actually. I have a lot of things to finish game-wise. Thanks, Frosty Tools, for your vote of confidence. I appreciate you. The upper study. Late night. The fire had burned low in the hearth, casting flickers of gold across the stone walls. The room was quiet, apart from the soft hum of the perimeter sensors beyond the windows. Marin sat in one of the high-backed chairs near the mantel, a blanket draped over her knees, her datapad in hand. On the screen was the crest, the Durza sigil, etched anew, refined from memory. Jared sat on the floor at her feet, cross-legged, his arms resting on his knees. Callista stood nearby, leaning against the window frame. Ooh, sorry. Arms loosely folded, and Ethan stood with his back to the fire, silently watching her. Marin turned the datapad towards them. He told Stefan, she said, her voice low but clear, what it meant. The crest, all of it. Jared tilted his head. The star, the circle, the scar. I always wondered. It wasn't for clan, Marin said. It wasn't even for war. She looked up at Ethan. It was for us. He and I. Ethan's expression didn't change, but something settled behind his eyes. He stepped forward slowly, looking at the crest on the screen, and then he dropped into the chair across from her with a quiet exhale. He carved it by hand, back when we were still running border ops. He scratched it into the hull with a vibro tool and a medallion tip. Marin nodded. The blade that broke the ring? That was his wife. Callista's gaze softened. He never spoke of her. He kept that pain to himself, Ethan said quietly. Didn't even tell me your name. Marin tapped the 3 small dots beneath the crest. He added these after I came to him. One for him, one for me, and one for the path forward. And now? Jared asked, his eyes meeting hers. Is it still just 3? Marin stared at the datapad for a long moment, and then she shook her head. No, she said softly. It's more now. You, Callista, Ethan, even Iran, everyone who helped shape the path. The crest was his legacy, but it's mine now. Callista stepped forward. Do you want to repaint it? Marin considered. No, not yet. Not with armor, not with a lightsaber, but maybe here. She touched her chest just above her heart. Ethan's voice was gruff but low. You already wear it. They all sat with her for a time. No more words. There was no need. Outside, the wind picked up across the mountain ridge. The Tracenia slept in its berth below, and the stars turned unseen but not unfelt above them. Durza Estate. Strategy room. Dusk. The room had been quiet for nearly an hour before the holocom lit up. Marin was alone. Ethan and Jared had gone to oversee the patrol in the northern forest. Callista was in the infirmary, restocking supplies. Silence suited her. She'd felt it coming. Not the call. The pull. The weight in her chest had returned days ago, slow, persistent, and unmistakable. She rose slowly, still favoring her left leg, and activated the comm. The blue light resolved into a familiar form. Stefan Card. He didn't speak right away, just studied her. She inclined her head first. You said you'd ask when it was time. It's time, Stefan said. Marin's throat tightened. What's the assignment? I'll explain when you arrive, he said gently. But it concerns Renius. That name hit harder than she expected. She nodded once. When do you want me there? 3 days, he replied. Give yourself that much. And pack light. I haven't been back since your trials, he finished for her. I know. Marin looked towards the far wall, the one where her old flight suit still hung, beside her damaged armor. She still couldn't hear the wind. She could still hear the wind off the cliffs at Mount Adon, still feel the stones of the training circle beneath her boots. The Praxium hadn't changed, but she had. I'll be there, she said. Stefan inclined his head and the hollow faded. Later that night, Marin stood by the window, her arms wrapped around herself. The lights were low. Behind her, Jared entered the room without a word and came to stand beside her. You knew he'd call. Marin nodded. I don't know why it involves Renius, he admitted. Do you need to? No, she whispered. But I want to. Jared didn't offer comfort. He didn't have to. His presence was enough. After a long pause, she finally said, I'm not ready to go back. But you will. Marin exhaled slowly. I will. Marin's room, late evening. The pack lay open on her bunk, half filled. Tunics, her journal, and a few carefully selected data pads. The edges of the folded tunics were neat and disciplined, the way Jarius had taught her. The way Ethan insisted she maintain. The way Stefan had expected when she was still just a girl with fire in her blood and too many ghosts on her shoulders. She sat on the edge of the bed, her brace newly adjusted, her fingers hovering over a folded cloak. Not her armor, not her old Padawan robes, just simple, practical travel wear, Connie-made, Jedi-shaped, hers. She hadn't worn this cloak since the day she passed her trials. She folded it again, and then unfolded it, inhaled, folded it once more. Stalling, she thought bitterly. Jared hadn't said anything, but he'd noticed. The way she lingered outside the hangar, the way she stood in the doorway to her father's study but never stepped inside. The way she brushed her fingers over the walls like they might vanish if she didn't say goodbye properly. She would go. She always knew that, but part of her still hadn't left the clearing. Brisinnia loomed before her in the hangar, silent as a mountain. The stars beyond the hangar glinted along its weathered hull. Across the hangar, Ethan's mantis stood dark, sealed, waiting. Marin ran her hand along the fuselage of the YT-1930. The panel where the Durza crest had been etched was clean, stored. The new markings were not painted, but carved. The circle hole, the slash intact. The scar, still visible. 3 stars beneath it. She exhaled and whispered, I'm going. There was a pause, as if the ship were listening, and then she turned and walked away. The next morning, she met Ethan at the base of the stairs. He looked her over, checked the brace, the weight of the pack slung over one shoulder, the quiet tension behind her eyes. He didn't stop her. He just reached out and adjusted the strap at her shoulder. You look ready, he said. I'm not, she replied. Ethan gave a slight nod. That's fine. Go anyway. Callista came down the hallway, her expression unreadable until she gently embraced Marin and whispered, If you feel the shift, follow it. You'll know when it comes. And then Jared was at her side, his lightsaber clipped to his belt, his travel coat already dusted from the morning wind. He didn't speak. He just nodded once. And together they walked out into the morning light. Sorry. Baton, Mount Adon, The landing pad. The wind was gentler here than Marin remembered. She stood still at the edge of the Praxium's highest stone landing platform, the peaks of Catan spreading out beneath her in silent welcome. Mist curled through the trees below. She drew in a breath. Jared didn't speak. He simply stepped down beside her, offering presence, not pressure. You don't have to say it, she murmured. I wasn't going to, but you're not alone, even when you walk in by yourself. She turned to face him. I know. He touched her shoulder once. I'll wait, however long. And then he stepped back towards the ship. Marin watched him go and then turned towards the path that would lead her to the stone steps of Mount Adon's inner courts. Each footfall echoed, slower than she'd like. Her knee still ached, the other still stiff. She didn't falter. Let the quiet of the mountain embrace her, stone, wind, and the breath of old memory. She passed the carved gates and entered the outer walkways. It felt like returning to a version of herself that she'd shed long ago. And then she saw Renius. The inner courtyard. He was already mid-motion, Boken slicing through the air, chasing echoes from a fight only he could see. His brow was furrowed in concentration on something else. Grief, maybe. Or longing. She approached quietly, but not quietly enough. His blade came around in a swift arc, stopping just short of her throat. She didn't flinch, but her fingers had curled near her belt. I'm sorry, he said, pulling back fast. I didn't sense you until you were close. Marin nodded, steadying her breathing. It's all right. Reflexes are good. She rubbed at her ribs, not from pain, from memory. Renius, are you all right? He looked away. I've had a lot on my mind. They spoke quietly and sat near the training circle. They talked of Arena, of grief, the strange presence that still haunted his thoughts. This girl from Coruscant, the mystery. And Marin listened. When he described the girl's stance, Marin stood, instinctively mimicking what she could. Renius mirrored it, and the two danced through remembered motions, her old instinct kicking in, his memory sharpening. And that was when Stefan entered, quiet, but not unwatchful. Later, within the circle, Marin sat again as Stefan paced slowly around the training circle. His hands were clasped behind his back. There's a style we don't often see anymore, he said. It's a single-handed grip, swift cuts. Movement is tied to the breath more than the step. That's not from here. That's the southern islands. Marin looked up, curious. Have there been any Jedi from that province at the Praxium? Not in some time, Stefan said quietly, which is why this girl stands out. I think it's time someone went to look. Renius straightened. You mean... Yes. Stefan turned to his son. Your path's been clouded, Renius. I don't say that as judgment. I say it because I know the signs. You need clarity. This may be the way. Marin's eyes narrowed. And you want me to go with him? Stefan didn't respond immediately. And then, I do. Renius began to protest, but the tone in his father's voice silenced him. I'll do it, Marin said after a moment. If it helps, if it brings answers, I want to go. Stefan nodded once. Good. Prepare yourselves, because the journey won't be easy. Marin didn't look away. Neither did Renius. Whatever lay ahead, on those faraway islands or beyond, it had already begun to stir. We're gonna go a little past 9. Maybe. We'll see. Praxium landing pad. Dawn. Mist clung to the stone as the first rays of light crept across Mount Adon's eastern rim. The sleek lines of the Katani transport shimmered in the chill morning air, its engines powered down, prepared for departure. Beyond it, nestled quietly in the Praxium's shadow, stood the Tristinia. Marin moved with slow purpose, her boots crunching faintly over frost-laced stone. Her limp was visible now, though she kept her shoulders straight, one step at a time. She wouldn't mask the pain, not from him, but she wouldn't let it rule her either. Jared waited beside the ramp of Tristinia, his arms crossed, his hood down. wind tousling the strands of blonde hair that had come loose. He didn't call out. He didn't move. He simply waited, steady, grounded, as he always was. "I won't be gone long," she said, her voice low as she approached. "Stefan doesn't think the trail will hold for more than a few weeks." "That depends on the trail," Jared replied, "and what you're meant to find." She smiled faintly. Cryptic. Accurate. There was a silence between them, not heavy, and not cold, just full, of things left unsaid and already understood. She turned, her eyes resting on Tresenia's hull, the matte gray now soft in the rising light. Her fingers brushed its edge as if grounding herself. "She's yours now," Marin said quietly. "Just while I'm gone. Don't let Ethan move her back to the estate unless you have to." Jared raised an eyebrow. "You're trusting me with Tresenia?" "I always have," she replied. That landed heavier than she'd meant it to. Jared exhaled slowly and stepped towards her. "You don't need to prove anything. Your cards are there," he said. "Not to Stefan, not to Rinius, not even to yourself." Marin's lips thinned. Her knee shifted, stiff, aching. She adjusted her stance with a quiet wince but kept her gaze locked on him. "I'm not proving anything," she whispered. "I just have to see this through." Jared studied her a moment longer and then nodded. "If you need me, I know where to find you. Always." She reached up, her palm brushing his cheek with familiar warmth, and then leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. A quiet gesture of goodbye and grounding all in one. "Come back," she murmured. "Just try not to rewire half the ship while I'm gone." "No promises." She smiled as she stepped back, barely, and then turned. Rinius stood near the transport's boarding ramp now, waiting. Not impatient, just respectfully distant. Jared didn't watch him. His eyes stayed on her, limp and all. Marin moved up the ramp slowly, one hand brushing the rail for balance, and when she reached the top, she turned back, just once. He was still there, watching, and for the first time since the clearing, she felt the horizon stretch forward, not only with dread or duty, but with something else. Purpose. Hope. Southern Katani coast, aboard the Sovereign, Day 3. The sea shimmered beneath a thin veil of mist, the rising sun slanting gold across the gentle swell. The sail liner Sovereign cut a smooth trail across the waves, her sleek frame a quiet match for the somber mood of those aboard. Marin stood alone at the portside deck, a wood-lined cloak drawn close about her shoulders. Sea air helped her breathe, helped her think. Her legs ached, stiff with cold, but she bore it without complaint, leaning against the railing just enough to give her limbs a break. A hand brushed the edge of her tunic absently, fingers closing on the tags around her neck. Darius's tags. A quiet presence moved up beside her. "You didn't sleep," Rinius said, keeping his voice low. Marin didn't look at him right away. "Did you?" He gave a faint laugh, wry, self-deprecating. "Not well." There was silence again, the kind that only the sea could carry. Then, almost before the breath behind it caught up, "I think she knew the style I use. Maybe even better than I do." Marin turned her head. Rinius' eyes were on the waves. "She didn't press me when she could have. I didn't press her either." His voice caught. "I keep going over it, those few seconds when she could have struck." "And didn't," Marin said softly. He nodded once. "Like I didn't." She studied him. "Do you think it was mercy?" He looked down at his hands. "No, not mercy. Something else." He hesitated. Recognition, perhaps. Or restraint. But not weakness. It didn't feel like that. A gust of wind caught the corner of her cloak. Marin studied it and turned her gaze toward the distant horizon. She said her stance was from the southern islands. Aye, it matched almost perfectly to a single-hand variation of the sixth form I learned from Andrea. He glanced back at the deck where his training satchel lay open, books already marked with paper tabs. Father said that the southern coast of stars are older. Some of them predate our current forms by centuries. "And someone kept them alive," Marin murmured. trained in them, passed them down. Renius nodded again, slower this time. That's what I hope to find. A trace, thread, something that links her back. They stood in silence again, sea curling beneath them. And then Marin asked, and if we do find it? If we find the place she came from? He looked at her. Then maybe we'll know what happened to her, whether whatever this is between us means anything. We have an ad starting in just under 5 minutes. Korriban, the barracks overlook. Ariana stood on the edge of the platform outside the training halls, her arms folded, lightsaber deactivated and clipped at her belt. Twin moons of Korriban hung low and red behind her, casting long shadows that danced with the wind-blown sand. She stared up at the sky as if daring it to speak. Why had she held back? She shouldn't have. It went against everything she was taught, against everything he demanded. Her father, cold and precise, had forged her with expectations sharper than her blade. There were no allowances for hesitation, no room for mercy. And yet, on that pad facing Renius' card, he had paused more than once. Her fingers curled at her sides, not in shame, in confusion. There had been a moment, brief, impossible, but real, when she'd sensed something in him. Not weakness, not even doubt, but recognition, as if they'd known each other in another life. She exhaled sharply, turning her head as Dante emerged from the corridor behind her. Still thinking about Coruscant? He asked. She didn't answer. You've been different since then. Different? She repeated. You're quieter. He looked at her more closely. Not soft, not uncertain, but distant. She scoffed and turned back to the railing. I've been thinking. That's not weakness. No, he agreed. What you're thinking about that worries me. She shot him a glare. You do realize I could cut you in half for saying that? He smiled faintly. Yeah, but you won't. She looked away again, her jaw tight, her voice lowered. He didn't finish it. That duel. He could have. He didn't. Dante's voice shifted. Neither did you. Southern Katani coast, the Sovereign, hours later. They dropped anchor near the edge of a deep bay flanked by sea-carved cliffs. The settlement they were seeking was further inland, but Marin and Renius had agreed to wait until morning to disembark. Marin sat cross-legged on a blanket near the bow. Her saber lay across her knees, not activated, but present. She ran her fingers slowly along the hilt, thoughtfully. I felt that kind of connection once before, she said. Without prompting, Renius looked up from his datapad. With who? My father. Her voice was steady, not by blood, but it didn't matter. I didn't know why I trusted him at first, but I did, and it changed everything. Renius was quiet for a long moment. Maybe that's what this is, some kind of echo. He looked over. Do you want it to be? I don't know. He stood and stretched, his eyes drifting towards the cliffs. But I want to understand it, and I think she does too. They stood... Oops, sorry. Marin nodded slowly. Then let's start with understanding who trained her. They stood together beneath the stars, two Jedi following threads they didn't yet understand. And far away on a red world, half lost to time, a girl named Ariana watched the night sky and wondered if someone out there still remembered her. We have an ad starting in about a minute. Catan, the southern provinces, day 6 of the journey. The trees thinned as the dirt path curved gently around a low hillside, revealing the rooftops of another modest village nestled between the sea and the forest's edge. Clay tiles, weathered beams, and colorful awnings, it looked much like the last two they'd passed, peaceful and unassuming. But Renius didn't miss the rhythm of practice strikes echoing faintly from beyond the rise. A training yard. He slowed his pace. Marin drew up beside him, brushing a wind-tossed strand of hair from her brow. Third one, she said, her voice quiet but steady. Do you think this is it? Renius shook his head once. I honestly don't know. Not until we see them move. He was quieter than usual, his brow drawn in thought. Marin let the silence linger for a few more paces before asking, "What is it you're looking for, exactly?" Stop right there, actually, because we have an ad coming up. Go get a drink, have a stretch, get a snack. I'll see you in a minute and a half. There we go. Alright. We're almost at the end of chapter 21. Okay. He blinked and glanced her way, then offered a half shrug. Oops, sorry. Yeah. He blinked and glanced her way, then offered a half shrug. Subtle markers, the way they shift their weight and recover balance, how they transition out of strikes. If they're trained in the island forms, it'll show. Marin gave a small nod, her eyes turning towards the crest of the hill. The only other places I've seen anything close is Darha. Bernice tilted his head. Were Bran trained? She nodded. He used to talk about it all the time. Darius took me there once before he brought me to Mount Adon. I was maybe 9? Her mouth tugged into a small, bittersweet smile. I remember the sound of wood on wood, the smell of the sea, the way they bowed to the ground before every kata. He gave her a look, part curious, part impressed. You've seen more of Catan than most people I know. It doesn't feel like it, she said. I still get turned around in the capital. That earned a faint smile. They entered the village just as the bells began to chime from a small corner tower. It was midday. The streets were quiet, with only a few villagers out and about. On a whim, Renia stopped and spoke to an older man stacking bundles of firewood near a stall. The man's eyes drifted to the wooden boken tied to Renia's pack. Warrior pilgrimage? The woodcutter asked, nodding once. Then you want to follow the east road just past the rice paddies. They train on a flat ledge above the ravine. You've seen them? Renius asked. They pass through town once a week, the man grunted. To resupply or drink themselves foolish. It depends on the week. He pointed with his axe. Open-air taverns just ahead. If you're looking to watch before you ask questions, that's your best bet. Renius thanked him with a respectful bow and then turned to Marin as they walked on. That makes 3 now who've pointed us east. Marin nodded, scanning the road ahead. They're starting to notice us. He exhaled through his nose. Let's eat first. Observe. If it feels right, we ask questions. The tavern was quiet, the covered dining space lined with wood beams and open walls that overlooked the coast. Few locals sipped broth and exchanged soft-spoken stories. Renius picked a shaded table near the edge where they could rest without drawing much attention. Marin eased onto the bench slowly, still favoring her injured knee. Her cloak remained drawn close, the edges of her boots dusted in red clay. I'll handle the ordering, Renius said. Just blend in. Maybe see what you can pick up. She offered a faint smile and closed her eyes as if meditating, but beneath the surface her mind fanned out through the tavern, sifting through stray thoughts and half-heard murmurs like water through reeds. He returned a few minutes later with 2 bowls of warm rice porridge, some fruit, and a pitcher of cool water. Anything? He asked, softly enough not to disturb the other patrons. Marin's brows pinched together. There's a cart making a delivery east of the village. Food, it sounds like. Bread, rice, greens. They're short on preserved fish. He paused and then added, Someone mentioned students. Renius lifted his water. Could be a resupply. Or another training hall. Either way, he said, it's something. She reached for her own drink absently. The place they're sending it to, it's open air. Similar layout to the tavern, actually. I got a rough impression. Her fingers twitched and she projected a hazy image into his mind. Tiered platforms of polished wood nestled under a canopy of trees. A large central circle, no walls. It was humble and practical. Renius nodded, chewing thoughtfully. That's more like it. They finished their meal quietly, listening to the wind stir the trees. As the tavern patrons began to thin, Marin flexed her fingers and let her senses roam again, seeking the quiet currents of the force. Do you want me to do anything specific once we get there? She asked as she poured the last of the water into their cups. For now, just observe. Don't engage unless you have to. The last school we passed, the students were watching us like hawks. He grinned faintly. They might actually challenge us. She arched an eyebrow. You're okay with that? If they do, we'll handle it carefully. It could draw the right kind of attention. And if it draws the wrong kind, we leave, he said, simply. Marin tilted her head, studying him closely. You've grown, she said. He looked at her. So have you. Yeah, I think I have enough vocal energy to do chapter 22. Oh, I appreciate you not interrupting, but you can always feel free to post in chat. I do try to respond when I see it. That's what I always tell people. You guys come in here like the library. I mean, it kind of is, but don't feel like you can't talk in here, because you definitely can. I just think it's funny that people treat it like it's a library. I'm gonna get some water before I start reading again. You could start wandering in like the sniper does. He wanders in character. I love it. I promise I'm not losing my voice. At least not yet. Okay. Chapter 22. The southern provinces, the edge of the training grounds. The sun had shifted by the time they reached the narrow trail east of the village. The road was mostly shaded, but the heat lingered, baked into the soil beneath the trees. They rode in silence until the distant sound of wooden blades drew Rhaenys' attention. He pulled ahead slightly, reining in as they reached a low, worn fence. "Here," he said, quietly, dismounting. Meryn followed suit, slower, one hand gripping the saddle as her boots hit the ground. She tried not to show it, but Rhaenys noticed her flinch, sharp, even if it was quickly buried. "You limped worse on the way in," he said, gently. She winced as she straightened. "I know, it's just tightening up again." He studied her for a moment, concern in his gaze, but not pity. "We can rest after this." Meryn gave a slight nod, reaching for the reins of both mounts. "Go on, I'll watch from here." They both knew what that meant. She would cover him if anything went wrong. Ahead, within the open courtyard, 2 students sparred with wooden blades. The clack of their weapons rang through the air, familiar, comforting in its rhythm. Rhaenys narrowed his eyes as he watched, analyzing their movements. "Distinct," Meryn murmured, her eyes narrowing. "Not the same as Coruscant, but similar." He nodded. "Close, but not quite. Let's see how close." Force nudged him, and without another further word, Rhaenys stepped over the low gate and down towards the circle. Meryn's voice came quietly behind him. "Rhaenys?" "Just observe," he replied. His tone was steady, his hands loose at his sides as he walked onto the training floor. His right hand found the familiar weight of the bogan at his hip, fingers curling around the hilt as he entered the circle. Meryn watched from beyond the fence, one hand close to the satchel where her saber rested. She felt it in the moment he shut himself off from the force. Her breath caught. He rarely did that. She scanned the area, expanding her senses slowly. For now, no other student stirred. That would change. Within the circle, Rhaenys cleared his throat. Both of the students turned, startled. "Who are you?" one of them demanded, his eyes narrowing at the traveler's garb. "What's your business here?" Rhaenys bowed faintly, but still respectfully. "A pilgrim," he said simply. "I've watched you spar. I ask the honor of testing myself against your style." There was a pause, and then a shared glance between the students. The challenge had been issued. Tradition dictated only one response. Meryn swallowed. She'd been part of a challenge like this once, years ago. Her hands tensed on the reins. The match began quickly. Thrust and overhead strike, block, redirection. Rhaenys moved through the opening exchanges with deliberate economy, letting the students press and then turning their momentum back on them. Meryn leaned forward unconsciously, watching the position of his feet, the angle of his blade, the brief, familiar pivot at the hip, one she'd seen him teach to initiates, and once, years ago, she'd used herself. They were good. He was better. However, Rhaenys was still outnumbered 2-1. The rhythm shifted and then snapped. A second pair of eyes turned to horror. Meryn felt it immediately. The creeping awareness of watchers not drawn to the duel, but to her. Hand grasped at her wrist. "Who are you?" She tensed, nearly struck, but held herself in check. "I am his companion," she said, quietly. "You'll come with us." The grip tightened. She inhaled sharply but nodded, easing from the saddle. Her stance remained loose, balanced and wary. Rhaenys felt it, a flicker through the void he had forced upon himself. Meryn's signal was muted, but present. Frustration, but also readiness. He reached for her in the force. "Are you able to handle them, or should we reveal who we are?" Her answer came sharp and uncertain. "Not yet." And then there was movement. Meryn twisted, snapping the boy's grip off her wrist and sending him stumbling with a sharp stripe to the chest. She stayed poised, watching for more. The duel inside the ring flared, Rhaenys utilizing his position, technique, and restraint. He drew the fight toward its finish, mirroring movements he remembered from Coruscant, faint echoes of Arianna's form. Outside the ring, Meryn was swept into her own defense. Another tried to catch her ankle. She fell hard, the breath punched from her lungs, but she rolled, rising with a swift elbow into her attacker's ribs. He folded with a choked breath. There was suddenly stillness. "Hold!" The command rang out across the courtyard like a bell. Meryn froze, gripping the tunic of one student in preparation for a throw. Bernice's blade was poised inches from another's neck. Silent fell. A figure approached, calm and confident, the master of the school. Subtle changes, Jedi, he said, his voice measured as he surveyed the circle. Where did you learn this? Merrin blinked. Title struck her like a gust of wind. She loosened her grip and lowered her stance, still uncertain. You may both stand down, the teacher added. There's no need to challenge me to finish this. Merrin eased away from her last opponent and limped forward, coming to the edge of the training circle. The teacher's gaze turned to her. You are? She hesitated only a moment. Merrin Durza, teacher. Recognition sparked faintly in his gaze. I mourned your father's passing. And then, more quietly to the students who had challenged her, you too would have faced a loss today had I not intervened. What followed? Something she hadn't expected. An invitation. The teacher's gaze lingered on the students beyond the window where Renius moved easily among them, his presence both graceful and unassuming despite having bested their top pupils. Merrin watched him too, quiet, the ache in her ribs a dull reminder that she had come here not as a warrior seeking conquest, but as a daughter chasing whispers of legacy. She shifted in her seat, grimacing slightly. The teacher didn't miss the motion. He turned back to her with a subtle frown. You're hurt. Merrin straightened it instinctively. I've been worse. I believe you. His voice was quiet, not patronizing. Still, you wear pain like armor, and it's not just the kind that bruises. Her gaze flicked up to meet his, suddenly wary. Your father did too, he added. Darius rarely spoke of his past, but when he came through here many years ago, I saw it in his shoulders, in the way he moved. He never told me about you, but he left something behind once. She stilled. I kept it in the hopes that one day someone might come looking. I don't know if he meant for it to be found, but... He rose, stepping toward one of the older shelves. With careful hands, he opened a drawer nestled beneath a stack of aged scrolls and drew out a long, wrapped object. Fabric weathered by time, its tie frayed, the edges singed by age. He laid it gently on the table between them. Merrin's breath caught. She reached forward, fingers brushing the cloth, and then pausing. She was almost afraid. And then slowly she unwrapped the bundle. Inside was a folded scrap of parchment, a sketch. Faint, but still visible. Two sigils intertwined. One was the Durza crest, her family's, a vertical blade with wings of stylized flame. The other she didn't recognize. A crescent nested with 3 blades, the mark of a school long faded. Below it, in Jarius's distinctive script, was written a single line in Katani. For the one who carries the flame. She drew in a shaky breath. He never told me he left anything here. He never told me he had a daughter, the teacher said gently. But I knew him long before Mandalore claimed him, before he became what the galaxy knew him as. I recognized that same fire in you the moment you stepped into the circle. She bowed her head, her hands tightening on the parchment. I wasn't always certain it was still there. It is. His voice was sure. Dimmed, perhaps, but not extinguished. For a moment, neither of them spoke. And then Merrin looked up again, her voice quieter. The hermit you mentioned, this student of yours who left for the mountain. Do you think he might recognize the style Renea saw in Coruscant? I believe he might. If anyone still remembers the variations we once explored, it would be him. He nodded slowly, holding the cloth back around the parchment with care. Then we'll go. At first light. The teacher inclined his head. I'll have provisions prepared, and I'll send a message ahead if the birds haven't forgotten the way. As Merrin stood, her limp more pronounced now that the adrenaline had faded, he gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Rest tonight, Merrin Durza. Not as a Jedi, not as a warrior, but as Jarius's daughter. The road ahead will wait. She swallowed hard, but managed to nod. Thank you, teacher. He watched her go, with the parchment still clutched in her hand like a tether to something long lost. And as the hall dimmed into evening, he whispered to the empty air. She does carry the flame, friend, and she carries it well. The wind shifted gently as the fire crackled low between them, the smoke curling in pale ribbons toward the dark canopy above. Night had fully taken the sky. Stars dusted the blackness, cold and bright and far removed from the weight of the ground below. Marin had been asleep for perhaps an hour when Rhenius stirred quietly, turning his head towards her. Her face was turned slightly away, tucked into the crook of her arm. The blanket was drawn up to her chin, and though her breathing was steady, there was tension in her posture that hadn't faded, even in rest. He sighed, his hands tucked behind his head as he studied the stars. He remembered Irina sleeping like that sometimes, too, like she was ready to run even in her dreams. And now Marin bore the same wound somewhere deep in her bones. "You carry it like a blade," he murmured softly, not intending to wake her. But Marin stirred, eyelashes fluttering faintly before she turned to blink blearily at him. "Hmm?" "Sorry," he said, wincing a little. "I didn't mean to wake you." She gave a quiet grunt and rolled onto her back, her knees stiff as she moved. "I couldn't sleep anyway," she admitted. "Something about tomorrow was weighing." Rhenius turned towards her fully. "Your knees still bothering you?" "A bit," she murmured, flexing them slowly beneath the blanket. "I keep thinking I'm past the worst of it, and then it reminds me." He hesitated, and then, with his voice low and careful, "Do you want to talk more about what happened? You don't have to. But I can tell it wasn't just the wound." Marin was quiet for a long time, her eyes flicking towards the stars before falling shut. "They didn't just ambush me," she said at last. "They pinned me, dragged me down. I took out two before they overwhelmed me. They wanted information, they wanted leverage, and they knew who I was." Rhenius waited. "They carved symbols into the dirt, markings, old Sith, old Mandalorian too. That they were watching everything, that they'd been following Trasunia, that someone had stole the signature trace from one of our old supply caches." Her hands clenched briefly. "I fought until they broke my knee. They were about to take me, haul me off when Iran came in, then Jared, then Ethan." Rhenius sat up slightly, listening. He didn't interrupt. She rubbed at her eyes. "They weren't trying to kill me. Not at first. That's what made it worse." "Sorry," Rhenius said, and he meant it. That they did that. That you were alone. I wasn't. Not really. They came for me." She let out a shaky breath. "But I remember kneeling there thinking that that was it, that I'd never get out, and for a second, just a second, I almost gave up." "But you didn't." "No," she whispered, "but I think part of me broke in that clearing." She didn't need to say it. He could feel the weight of her words. That part of her, the young warrior who had once thought sheer willpower was enough, had been changed. Bent, not broken, but changed forever. "You came back from it," Rhenius said finally. "Even if you limp, even if you never fight quite the same way again, you're still standing." She gave a soft laugh, dry and sardonic. "With help. With a lot of help. That's not weakness." She looked across at him. "You sound like Ethan." He smiled faintly. "He's not wrong." They fell into silence again, the night setting thick around them. Marin stared up at the stars, and after a while her breathing eased again. This time, she did sleep, and Rhenius lying awake beside the fire that had long burned to little more than coals, thought of the journey that still waited for them in the morning, Swordmaster in the Cove, the questions left unanswered, and in the strange thread that connected Marin's pain to his own uncertainty. He didn't know what they would find, but he knew that they would face it together. I need water. The third morning came quietly. Mist clung low to the trees, dew coating the ferns and brushed the edge of the clearing. The fire had died to little more than a ring of embers, and Marin was the first to stir, drawing in a slow breath and shifting beneath her blanket. Her knees ached dully in the cold. She breathed into it and rolled onto her side, sitting up carefully. By the time Rhenius joined her, she already had the water heating and was tying off her bedding with practiced hands. I know, gotta have enough water. Neither of them spoke at first, just the rustle of packs and the steady murmur of early morning filled the space between them. Bernice had just cinched his bedroll behind the saddle when he froze. Marin caught it. His pause, the slight tension in his shoulders. Her hand drifted unconsciously toward the E10 holstered at her side. Bernice? She murmured. His hand rose, silent and steady. Not yet. Through the force, he sent her the same signal. Hold. Not fear. Not even danger. Just caution. Marin nodded once and lowered her hand slowly, finishing the knot on her gear with careful fingers. She reached for the kettle, pouring the hot water into their flasks, and then quietly began scattering the ashes of the fire. Meanwhile, Renius eased his boken into his hand and moved away from camp. Deliberate. Casual. He kept his senses open, his eyes flicking through the canopy as if he were surveying the trail ahead. But he felt it. Watching. Waiting. He had just stepped around a boulder when it happened. The breeze shifted. There was a flicker of motion. His instinct screamed. He dropped into a roll as a blur dropped from the trees, fast, silent, and lethal. The stranger spoke and sliced the air where his skull had been a heartbeat earlier. Renius spun, blocking the next strike with his own blade and a shower of bark and dust. Across the clearing, Marin had turned sharply at the sound. Her eyes locked onto the two forms now engaged in a sudden, brutal flurry of strikes. Renius? She called through the force. Tense, standing half-crouched near the horses. Stay back, he called aloud, parrying two more heavy blows. She gritted her teeth. Her boken was already in her hand, but she held her ground, watching with worry as they clashed. The attacker moved like water over stone. Fast, precise, every strike intentional. Renius met him move for move, his stance shifting fluidly into the same style they had traced across the continent. Marin's breath caught. It's him. It has to be. And then, as sudden as a lightning bolt, the stranger twisted inside Renius' guard, and turning his boken and wrenching it free. It flew across the clearing. Renius barely registered the move before his legs were swept from beneath him. He hit the dirt hard, and when he looked up, the tip of the attacker's wooden blade was aimed squarely between his eyes. Who taught you those moves? The man demanded, his voice sharp with suspicion. Renius didn't move. Let me explain. Who? The older man barked, cutting him off. At the edge of the clearing, Marin had already secured the horses. She moved quietly now, approaching slowly. As she knelt on a flat stone, posture still and deferential, but her eyes never left them. I had those moves used against me, Renius said, calmly, by a young woman on Coruscant several months ago. The man narrowed his eyes. Liar! I haven't taken a student in years. I didn't think she was your student, Renius answered, still not moving. But she used your style, and I came here to find out why. The stranger's gaze flicked towards Marin and then back again. Something shifted in his stance. Your name. Up. Renius Card, he said, gestured slightly to Marin. My companion is Marin Durza. We were looking for someone familiar with the style, to learn. Marin lifted her eyes then, steady as she met the man's stare. Her hand drifted to her chest, fingers brushing the chain looped around her neck. She didn't know if her name held any meaning for him, but she bowed her head slightly anyway. I apologize if we intruded on your solitude, he said softly, Katani. We only seek information. The man's expression twitched at the Card name. Card. I know that one. And the other? His gaze slid to Marin. Durza. You wear the name, but you were not Katani born. I hear our words on your tongue, but not in your blood. Marin swallowed. Her fingers closed around the dull blue tags hanging beneath her tunic. My father was Jarius Durza, she said softly. I am his daughter by choice, not by blood. The name, the man's gaze narrowed further. For a moment, the forest held its breath. I knew him, he said finally. Once. There was weight in those words, something old, something filled with regret. Marin bowed again, lower this time. Then you knew honor, she said quietly, and perhaps you understand why we came. The man lowered the boken and stepped back. Rise, both of you. Bernice pushed himself up, brushing the dirt from his side and retrieving his weapon. Marin approached slowly, respectfully, keeping her hands in view. The stranger watched them both closely, testing, measuring. You're lucky I didn't break your skull, he said to Bernice. Your defense was quick. I chose not to use the force, Bernice replied. It wouldn't have been right. And we have an ad starting, so I'm gonna go to BRB, and I'm gonna get myself a snack. See you guys in a minute and a half. Go have a snack, drink of water, have a stretch. Take care of yourselves. I'll be back. Alrighty. Welcome back. I went and got a snack. Apparently reading makes me hungry. I don't know. I chose not to use the force, Bernice replied. It wouldn't have been right. That seemed to satisfy him, though he said nothing more on it. He turned to Marin again instead. You said your name is Durza, but your posture, your deference, you were trained. I was, she said, by Master Stefan Card and by my father before he was killed. Her voice was even, but the last words landed like stones. The stranger nodded once, slowly. Then you have my attention. He turned, gesturing up the path. There's an old shrine a little further along the path. That's where I take visitors when I take them at all. If you came to learn, walk with me. And be ready, I don't suffer half-efforts. Marin glanced at Rhenius. Her knee still ached. She didn't limp. Not today, and not in front of the man who had once walked beside her father. She moved quietly, retrieving the horses and slinging her pack over one shoulder before falling in step with Rhenius. Still wasn't entirely sure why she had even come. Rhenius had his reasons, his mystery to chase. She was following a thread, but now that thread was winding through the life of someone who had known her father. That alone made her stay. They walked in silence for a long stretch until something shifted in the trees. Marin slowed, her eyes narrowing. There, barely visible, sat a slow, weathered building nestled into the slope of the hill. She wouldn't have seen it at all had she not been looking for it. It seemed to be part of the land itself, ancient and steady. Renee saw it too. The path opened onto a small outer porch built from faded wood. The old swordsman stepped onto it without a word and slipped off his sandals. Rhenius followed his lead, pulling off his boots. Marin hesitated for half a breath and then did the same, leaving her boots by the steps as she crossed the threshold. There we go. Their host gestured them toward a loose circle of worn wooden stools. Marin took one, easing down carefully and trading a glance with Rhenius. Her knee still ached, but she managed to hide it well. A pot of tea already sat on a small brazier in the corner of the porch. He poured tea for each of them in silence, setting the cups on the low table. When he finally spoke, it was to Rhenius. "I know your family is Jedi," he said, matter of fact, "but I assume this opponent you faced could use the Force." Marin inclined her head respectfully, murmuring a soft Forentia. She accepted the tea, the familiar words and gesture anchoring her. She curled her fingers around the cup and thumbed idly at the chain around her neck, Darius's tags glinting faintly in the morning light. Rhenius sipped once before nodding. She was fast. Too fast to be normal, not just speed either, anticipation. She read every move before I made it. The man studied him for a long moment and then leaned back slightly. "I haven't had a student in many years, Card, but the last one I taught, she was like that too. Gifted. Perhaps the best I'd ever trained." He looked down at his cup, his voice distant. Marin frowned faintly. "How long ago?" she asked. 20 years, he said, after a short pause, give or take. She was only my second or third student. Quiet one. She learned fast. She never spoke much about her past, but there was strength in her. And fear. Rhenius turned towards him. Was she from the island provinces? The accent, the girl I fought, it had that sound. The swordsman shook his head. No. She was northern, same dialect as yours, even. She broke training one day without a word. One morning I went to wake her and she was just gone. No note, no signs of a struggle. I searched for weeks. Marin tilted her head, watching him closely. No one took her? Not that I could find. She simply vanished. Rhenius sat back, rubbing his forehead. Her name? The man's voice was quieter now. Erin Marcaine. Rhenius froze. Marin caught it immediately. She sat up, frowning. You know that name? He nodded slowly. I think that my father knows it better than I do, but I've heard it, and it wasn't in a good context. Marin's fingers tightened around her teacup. She turned towards the older man, watching his face as Rhenius rose and began pacing the edge of the circular training ring just beyond the porch. Sorry. The old man glanced after him and then nodded. Let him think, he said, gently. I'll catch a few fish for tonight's meal. The river's close. I won't be long. Marin offered a faint nod and watched him disappear down the path towards the water, fishing gear slung over one shoulder. She sat for a long time in silence, and then, setting her empty cup aside, she stood, slowly, and stepped down into the circle. Her saber hilt came to hand. She turned it over once, twice, and then she ignited it. The black cord orange blade hummed to life, casting warm light on the weathered stones as she moved into her opening form. Slow, deliberate, focused. Behind her, Rhenius finally spoke. A Sith. She froze, just for an instant, and then she deactivated her saber and turned towards him, her eyes sharp. You're sure? Rhenius nodded once. I was barely more than a child, but I remember the story. My father fought a Sith here on Catan. It must have been 18 or 20 years ago. Aaron Marcaine. He never said much about it, but I remember the name. Merrin was quiet, her thumb brushing the ridges of her saber hilt. Do you think she and the girl you faced are... I don't know. He looked at her. A daughter, maybe. She would be the right age. If Aaron left the training and fell, then maybe this girl inherited more than technique. Ariana, Aaron said softly. That's her name, isn't it? It was the first time she'd said it aloud. Rhenius exhaled. Yeah, Ariana. Jared and I met her on a mission to my home planet. She was in disguise at first. I didn't recognize her until we crossed paths again on Coruscant. And she knew you? He did. He looked down, his jaw tight. She was the one who stabbed Ethan outside Maxwell's office, and then... She ran. Merrin's face darkened. I'm glad Callista was there. Rhenius didn't answer right away. He turned, pacing a short arc along the ring. I still don't know why we both held back, even when we were face to face. Merrin stepped forward and rested a hand lightly on his shoulder. Maybe there's something in you that sensed she wasn't the true enemy. I don't know, he said softly, but I came here to learn, understand, and now that I'm here, I'm not sure what to do next. He gave him a small smile. And start where you can. Train. Ask questions. Listen. That's what I'm doing. He looked at her, and for a moment they stood there silently, an understanding passing between them. Maybe we're both meant to come, he said. Even if we don't understand why yet. Merrin nodded. I still don't know my purpose here either. Only that I felt something pulling me. Something I couldn't ignore. And for the first time in days, her thoughts quieted. Not because she had answers, but because she was finally in the right place to ask them. The scent of charred herbs and grilled fish mingled with the salty air of the nearby sea. A small cooking fire crackled softly on the hearth as night settled over the quiet shrine. Lanterns cast a warm amber glow when the porch doors had been opened wide to let in the ocean breeze. Merrin sat with her legs folded beneath her, her cup of tea cradled in both hands, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. Rhenius had gone out earlier, foraging along the tree line. The wild vegetables he'd brought back now sizzled lightly over the coals beside the fish the old swordsman had caught. Nothing elaborate, just fresh, seasoned, and shared. They ate in near silence at first, gathering in a loose circle around the hearth at the center of the hut. The flames danced across their faces, the quiet between them not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. I'm not originally from this region, the old man said softly as he sat down on the cup. I came here from the northern mountains 10 or so years ago. Same range you're from, young Card. Rhenius glanced up. I thought your accent sounded different from the locals. His voice was calm, but Merrin caught the way his gaze sharpened slightly. Why the move? Asked her. The older man's lips quirked in a faint smile at the title. It hadn't gone unnoticed. After my wife passed, I no longer belonged in that place. My son and I, we were estranged. We argued. He was headstrong and stubborn, just like I was. I thought I could raise him into someone better than myself. He sighed heavily. Instead, he stayed with friends and pursued his own path. I left. I wandered, taught where I could, and eventually I settled here. Merrin looked up from her plate, her eyes finding Rhenius's for a brief moment, but it wasn't Rhenius she was thinking about. There was something in the way the old man spoke of his son, something unspoken, something familiar, the weight of absence. I learned the local style here, he continued, warming his tea again, blended it with what I knew from home, borrowed pieces from the provinces, from our colonies. I built something I could still carry with me, my own way. Rhenius nodded, rubbing a thumb slowly over the lip of his teacup. If you'll excuse me, sir, he said quietly. I'm tired from the day's travel. I'd like to turn in. The swordsman inclined his head. The next room has bedrolls. You are both welcome here as long as you wish. Marin glanced at Rhaenys, her brow twitching faintly. He would ask for training soon. She could feel it. But tonight, something deeper pressed on her mind. Why did you feel the need to create your own style? She asked softly once Rhaenys had disappeared into the next room. Was it grief? Or something else? The old master didn't respond right away. He stirred the fire with a stick, letting the embers flare briefly. I don't know, he admitted at last. Maybe I needed to feel like I still had something worth passing on. Something that was mine. Something left after everything else fell away. Marin nodded slowly, her thumb brushing Jairus' tags again where they hung beneath her tunic. Teacher, she began cautiously, if I may, what happened between you and your son? What truly drove you apart? The man sighed, deeper than before. Duty, he said. I was often away training military units, special tactics, force recon, close combat work. My wife fell ill. I couldn't come back in time. When she passed, my son never forgave me. He gestured gently toward a small alcove tucked into the shadows. A shrine stood there, a niche carved for the lady, flickering with a single candle. Hanging from the edge of the niche were a pair of dull, worn military tags. Marin's eyes locked onto them. The air left her lungs. They were almost identical to the ones she always carried. She clenched her hand tightly around Jairus' tags, hard enough that the metal edge bit into her skin. A faint hiss escaped her lips as she rose and moved to the alcove. Her fingers brushed the second set, gently, reverently. I think maybe he did forgive you, he whispered, in his own way. The old man closed his eyes, his breath trembling. I tried to follow his life from a distance. Heard he had a family. I was proud. But then the reports came. The explosion, the rampage afterward. He never came to me. There was a tear on his cheek, and he didn't bother to hide it. Marin, how did my son find you? She turned slowly, kneeling on the mat between them, her eyes glassy as she remembered, and tried not to think about how the motion pulled at her knees. I was 5, maybe 6. I tried to steal from him. He caught me on his ship, and I drew a blade. A pained laugh left her chest. It snapped against his armor, and instead of turning me in, he gave me a choice. She swallowed hard. He raised me as his own, trained me in the Mando way, then the Katani, and eventually, he brought me to Mount Adon. The swordsman stared at her for a long moment, and then he motioned gently. The tags. May I? Her hands trembled slightly as she unclasped them and passed them over. He turned them over, tracing the etched characters with his fingers. Rank, branch, even specialty. My designation, he murmured. My exact field. He couldn't bring himself to ask the question. Not fully. He never spoke of you, Marin whispered. But maybe that was his way of honoring what was lost. Quietly, she began to recount what she knew. Of Jairus' final years, of Tanagas, of the house he built, of the room he had intended for a daughter he would never meet, and the daughter he raised instead. And the old man listened until his breath hitched again. My son. He passed the tags back to her with reverent hands and slowly rose, pacing to the porch. But then he turned back. You said you went through the bonding? She stood and nodded, voice barely louder than a breath. I am his daughter, in both Katani and Mandalorian customs. His hand trembled slightly as he reached out, resting it gently on her shoulder. A surprise for both of us today, he said, softly. Her breath caught. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Grandfather, she whispered in Katani, I hope I have done right by him. You're here, he answered, sitting down beside her. And you are helping the son of a noble house. That is enough. When he switched back to basic, it was quieter. I never heard from Jairus again after his family's death. I knew he left the Marines. Where did he call home? Nagas 5, Marin answered. He's built a home there. Quiet, remote. The room he gave me was meant for the daughter he lost. His wife and child died in a shuttle explosion. Who was responsible? She clenched her fist again. Herzad, she said, the word thick with venom. They'd been tracking him for years. Embedded operatives, surveillance tech we only just found. It led to 3 infiltrations. They nearly killed me the last time. And the man behind it? Janos Duran. His face hardened. Duran? I knew the family. That was him? Dead, she said flatly. Ethan killed him during a rescue after I was taken. The old man was silent for a long time, and then he asked, very gently, "Where does Jerry's rest now?" He lowered her gaze. There was no body, but we recovered his helmet. It rests in the shrine at the estate. The rest of his armor was reforged into mine. He looked at her, unmoving. I meant the place of mourning. Baron flushed faintly. Edmonton, she whispered. The military cemetery, for veterans, soldiers, and their kin. I will go, he said, rising with slow dignity. He helped her to her feet, and she squeezed his hand, her left, without noticing the cut still fresh in her palm. Seems we both have questions tonight. Aye, she whispered, though tonight you answered many of mine. I'm aware. He blinked, and then slowly, gently, wrapped her in an embrace. She hesitated and then returned it, arms gently around his back, face against his shoulder. His voice was soft. A granddaughter. And in that moment, the weight she had carried since the day she lost Jarius didn't vanish. But it finally had somewhere to rest. The embrace lingered. Maren let herself rest in it, but only for a moment. The warmth of it, the quiet strength in his arms reminded her of someone long gone. She hadn't realized how much she missed being held like this. Not since Jarius. Not like this. He eased back slightly, his hand still resting on her shoulder, his eyes searching hers in the firelight. You hide it well, he said. Her lips parted, but she said nothing at first. There was a slight shift of her weight that made her wince. You've been favoring your left leg, he continued. Even when you sat, you leaned to take pressure off your knee. I saw it when you walked in. You've had training to mask it, but not from someone who spent a lifetime watching soldiers limp into the mess tent pretending they're fine. Maren glanced away, her jaw tightening. It's a couple of months old, she said, finally. Mostly healed. And the right? He asked, his eyes flicking downward. There's tension. Scar tissue, maybe. She nodded once. Shuriken. Barbed. They pulled it out at the estate. There was silence between them, not heavy, but full. Jared carried me back, she said after a moment, to Callista. Ethan wasn't far behind. He lost it when he saw me. Her voice broke slightly, but she swallowed it down, steadying her breath. It was my fault. I went after intelligence alone. I didn't wait. I thought I could... No, the old man said, quiet but firm. She blinked. No warrior walks without scars, he said. But my son trained you well. I can see it. You survived. Maren laughed weakly. Barely. Then you're stronger for it. He looked at her then. Really looked beyond the outer signs of pain. You came here limping not because you were still hurt. You came because you refused to stay behind. She didn't answer, but her gaze didn't falter. He nodded once. You are my son's daughter. And then, softer, gentler, in the way of men who had buried too much to say aloud. You ever wish to speak of what happened or need help retraining that leg? Not just a swordsman. Maren's throat worked around an answer, her left hand flexed slightly, scar tissue pulling at the cut as the cut throbbed faintly against her palm. I might take you up on that, she said. Eventually. Good. He patted her shoulder again, firmer now, then sleep. Tomorrow we begin again. Oh, perfect timing. Oh, I love that. Okay, that's the end of chapter 22. I will next be reading in 2 weeks, which would be, hold on, brain. 2 weeks from now would be the 13th. I love it when I end or like stop reading right on time. Perfect. So yes, I will be reading again in 2 weeks, which would be August 13th, 7 p.m. Eastern. In the week in between, which is August 6th, I will be playing Star Wars: The Old Republic, probably doing flashpoints with friends, and then I have a writing workshop stream on August 10th. Yes, exceptional timing. We have an ad starting in 5 minutes. I am not going to raid out this evening. It is 10 o'clock. And you know how this goes, Ajo. You know how this goes. But yes, probably flashpoints next Wednesday. I will see you guys all next Wednesday for some SWTOR shenanigans. And hope you guys all have an awesome rest of your week. Take care of yourselves. Take those meds if you have them. Make sure you get plenty of water and rest. And I will see you all next week. Have a great night, you guys. Bye-bye.